Good day, everyone. I decided to go ahead and make this account to tell this story. I don't know if I actually avoided something sinister for a fact, but I'd rather play it all safe and say that I did. I'm 29 years old and female, and while I'm well-traveled and have been around quite a bit, I do occasionally make some pretty rookie mistakes. My fault, and I make no excuses. I try to remain diligent and alert, but I'm very capable of letting my guard down. So after being here in the US for about 2 months, I decided that I was bored sitting around my apartment all day watching 90 Day Fiancé. So I made the decision to make the old dating profiles again. I made no specific intentions known about what I was interested in accomplishing, as I don't really know myself. I just wanted someone to hang out with, and to see where it went naturally. I ended up matching up with this one bloke who had shared interests with me. We chatted a bit over the app, and eventually I felt okay to give him my number. After talking back and forth for a couple of weeks, I agreed to a meetup. We met at a pub and had a couple of drinks. I'll admit at first I didn't recognize him because he didn't really resemble his photos to the extent that I was expecting. He didn't look bad by any means, but I could tell that he used older pictures and edited them enough to where he seemed more appealing. I swear I'm not trying to sound superficial, because he was cute, just not what I was expecting. But I also think we've hit a point in social media culture where it's safe to assume that we won't see the same thing in real life as we do online. And that's okay for the most part. We did hit it off, however. We discussed the usual first date stuff, then we got into more detail. I told him about back home and work and how life was different than here in the States. At one point, we were talking and holding hands, and I felt comfortable enough to let him kiss me. Well, he asked me as we were leaving if I wanted to go back to his place for a cup of coffee. I told him I knew what coffee really meant, and that I didn't want to do that on a first date. He assured me it would be 1 cup of coffee, and that he would give me a lift home so that I didn't have to call an Uber. I accepted this offer, and we walked to his apartment, which was only a few blocks away. As we were heading upstairs, he made a few questionable remarks. He mentioned how I wasn't like most girls, because I accepted his invitation and alluded that, you never know, I could be a psychopath. He then motioned with his eyes down to my dress and inquired about my breast size. I told him again that I was sorry, but the night wasn't going to end up with him getting lucky. As we got into his unit, he dismissed himself to the toilet and left me sitting on his bed. It was a studio and he didn't have a couch, just FYI. As I'm sitting there and waiting for him to finish doing whatever he was actually doing, I noticed from the corner of my eye that beside his bed, he had 2 masks. One was a cartoon-looking goat mask, and another was a cat, maybe a tiger. What was more alarming was that he also had a Bowie knife and a small woodcutter's axe only a short distance away from them. Upon further observation, I also noticed that there was a black jumper draped over a dresser, and then on his bedside table, there were clear as day a pair of latex gloves. Okay, I don't feel much like being murdered tonight, so I got up, calmly left the unit. Then I made haste down the stairs and down the street, where I was able to catch a lift with no problem. Now look, I may have just really hurt his feelings because he may have had no malicious intent, but if that's all that happened, then I'd prefer that over the possible alternative. All of these items wouldn't have been that bad on their own, but all of these random items within a short distance from one another, I'd rather just not chance it. I do feel bad for leaving a person, but I don't feel bad about leaving what could have potentially been a dangerous situation. That, along with his seemingly random personality change as we were heading upstairs, was enough for me to make the call that I made. As of recently, I noticed that he either blocked me from Tinder or deleted the app altogether. And to be honest, I'm totally good with that. I had no intention of having further interactions with the guy, but I do find it a little odd that I may have been the one that got blocked, and not the other way around. Now, this may not be up there with the most creepy stories found on this forum, and I'm okay with that too. I wasn't down to stick around for 10 more minutes just to find out how weird things could have gotten, simply to impress people on the internet. I do want to offer one point of advice. Be careful with your swipings, everybody. You never know who you're going to match with. I grew up in a small town. Total population, maybe 2,000. Everyone knew everyone else, or at least knew your family members. We all felt that it was a safe town, with mostly middle-class working families. Nothing major ever happened, and the crime rates were pretty low. I grew up feeling safe and secure, and just for note, I grew up in the 90s. One summer day, my good friend Jenny and I were out for a bike ride. We were no more than 11 or 12 years old at the time. We were allowed to bike anywhere we wanted, as long as we didn't leave our town and wore our helmets. There was a new road being constructed in between the two main neighborhoods of our town. The new road was to provide a shorter way of accessing the main road to get to the next town over. At the time, the road was still under construction, but it was nearly complete. All that was left was paving and painting. Jenny and I decided to bike down that gravel road. Jenny and I were about halfway down the road. The road was maybe 1 kilometer long. At the halfway point, we noticed a man walking. He was in his early 30s and very handsome from what I can remember. I didn't recognize him, and Jenny didn't either. As we got closer, he broke out a big smile and said hello. We said hello back as he didn't seem threatening or scary. He asked us if we were having a good summer, and we said yes. He told Jenny and I that he was a photographer from a nearby city and was in town to scout out models for his new postcard company. He said Jenny and I had beautiful features. He said everything in a very flattering way that made us feel special, and he said that we could be models. He asked us if he could take our pictures. He said that we had the look that he wanted, and the scenery right now is perfect to promote the town. He said he knows he will sell tons of postcards, and we could all make some money. Jenny and I eagerly agreed. He got us to stand with our hands on our hips and smile big. He took a disposable camera out of his back pocket and began snapping away photos. He took maybe 10 photos in total, from all sorts of angles. I remember feeling a little uneasy and said that we should probably go because we needed to get home soon. He said he would get in touch with our principal on the first day of school to make sure that we got our share of the proceeds from the postcard sales. We foolishly confirmed that we went to the local elementary school, though it was the only elementary school in town, so it wouldn't have been that hard to figure out. Neither Jenny or I remember to this day giving him our names. This is an important detail for later. Jenny and I talked about becoming famous on the way home. I told Jenny that I wondered why he didn't have a professional camera. She said she wondered that too, but we agreed cameras were expensive, so maybe he didn't have a nice one with him in case it rained. That evening at supper, I told my parents about the potential of my new fame. They were horrified and got on the phone with Jenny's parents right away. The two sets of parents called police and gave statements. Police sort of downplayed it and said it was unusual, but nothing criminal had happened. My parents had a long talk to me about safety, as did Jenny's parents with her. The following spring, Jenny and I were hanging out together, this time a little older and a little wiser and a lot more cautious. We were walking along a quiet side street, just talking about music and TV shows, when a minivan approached us and slowed down. A friendly-looking woman popped her head out the window and asked us if we knew where Smith's Road was. We told her that she just needed to stay straight for less than a minute, and it'd be the first right-hand turn. She said she was having difficulty finding it, and would we mind hopping in and showing her personally? I instantly said no. After a little prompting, Jenny also declined. Then the woman said it was okay, because she knows who we are. She called us both by first name and said she saw us on a postcard. By now, we were both absolutely freaked out. We were on a stretch of the road that had no houses. The nearest one was maybe 100 meters away, and it wasn't common for people to have cell phones back then, so neither Jenny or I had one. The woman continued to ask us to get into her minivan. Jenny, who is normally super chatty, was staring into the vehicle intensely. Her body language was stiff, and I could tell that she was frightened. Suddenly, and seemingly out of nowhere, Jenny screamed, "Run." I didn't know what was happening, but I ran with Jenny stride for stride. We ran off the road and through a field and into a yard another street over. I recognized the yard and house as belonging to a school teacher of ours. We pounded on her door, and she answered right away. We told her what had happened, and then Jenny said something that I will never forget. She said she saw the photographer man from last summer crouching down in the very back row of seats. She said she knew that something bad was going to happen if we got in that minivan. Both police and our parents were called. We gave statements and a vehicle description, as well as descriptions of the man and the woman. Unfortunately, the police were never able to locate them. Jenny and I never saw them again. We had some serious trust issues with strangers after those encounters, and I even had nightmares of being kidnapped into early adulthood. Always make sure to teach your children that strangers are not safe, no matter how nice they might be. My situation could have had a much more unfortunate outcome if things had gone even slightly differently. Those are two people I sincerely hope to never meet again. This past Monday, my coworkers and I returned to our hotel from a day of work out in the field. Rebecca and I walked to our rooms, and as we stood outside of the doors, I opened mine up and saw someone in the bathroom. I said, "Hello?" Nobody answered. My first instinct was that it was a cleaning lady in there for some reason. But then I saw my bag with my clothes in her hands. I said to my coworker, "There's a woman in my room." Then I asked the woman, "What are you doing with my stuff?" It gets a little hazy here because I can't remember everything I said and what she said, but she kept mumbling about how her key still worked, how it still worked, and that's how she got in. I was in shock, and she was obviously very flustered, having been caught mid-robbery. She dropped my bags and fumbled around with her purse and a white plastic bag. By this time, my coworker was behind me watching all of this insanity unfold. This woman was scrambling and walking towards the door, and I said, "What's in the bag?" thinking it's probably some of my stuff. And so she said, No, it's just my things, I'll show you." And so she did. I looked through the bag and didn't see anything of mine, and since I'm obviously in shock at this time, I just let her leave. I went into my room, and it's clear that it had been ransacked. I did a quick look around to see if anything had been taken. All of my electronics were still there. Then I went into the bathroom, and I saw my underwear, my bikini, and my clothes shoved into my own bags at random. Even my passport was shoved in there. Then I look on the counter, and I see that she got into my medication. I'm not sure what was going through my head at that moment, other than I wanted it back. So I ran out the door to go find her. I ran to the laundry room downstairs and out to the sides of the hotel and didn't see her. I realized then that I was never going to find her. So my coworker and I went down to the lobby to tell them what happened, and then we called the police. We went back up to my room to wait, and that's when I noticed that there's a metal bat on my bed, a little larger than one of those souvenir wooden bats that you get at a baseball game, but there's also a flashlight on the end. She must have left it behind in her hurry. She also left behind a necklace that must have fallen out of her bag when she was scrambling with mine. I was mostly freaking out at this point because I thought she'd gotten away with my medication that I needed. The police got there and took our statements and looked around the room as well. One thing that I noticed was that there were bits of drywall in the sink, and I pointed that out to the cops, but none of us really knew where it came from. We started looking at the door and the windows to see if she pried her way in somehow, but there was nothing. So we kind of just went with the idea that she'd had a spare key or something, even though the hotel front desk was adamant that there's no way that could be. The officer that came brought 2 more officers as backup because they thought the woman might still be in the vicinity. But after our statements were taken, there was nothing else that they could really do, so they left. I sat down to finally make some calls to tell people, and as I'm on the phone, I'm thinking more and more about the drywall in the sink, and it still didn't make any sense to me. So I'm on the phone and looking at the drywall and the mirror on the wall right above it, and that's when it hit me. I got my coworker and asked her to help me pull at this mirror on the wall, and when we took the mirror down, plain as day, there's a hole that's just big enough for a desperate junkie to squeeze through. I asked Rebecca if I should call the cops again to let them know that I found this, and that's when she says, there's still 2 cop cars in the parking lot. So I ran down there to tell them, and the female cop kinda rolled her eyes at me. But the young guy said, "I'll come check it out." They both came back up, looked in the hole, and found a pillow, blankets, cigarettes, clothes, toothbrushes. This woman had been living in the wall behind my mirror for God knows how long. She had access to me and my room at all times. I know it might be hard to picture, but there was a crawl space about 2 feet wide in between the 2 rows of rooms. One of the officers called the original officer to come back and take pictures of this. She explained to him what was going on, and all I hear over the radio is, "No f***ing way." He comes back, takes pictures, and is just as mind blown as the rest of us. Obviously, we packed up and left immediately. What's even crazier is she has probably been there for a long time. The last time we stayed at this hotel, I would randomly smell cigarette smoke, and I had just assumed that someone was smoking in their bathroom and it was traveling through the vents. But now, I think that's a big nope. There was actually just a junkie smoking on the other side of my mirror. She had access to other rooms too. The holes in the walls were from a renovation, and the hotel hadn't properly patched. They had just covered up the holes in the walls with mirrors. She could have been hanging out in people's rooms when they were gone. There's really no resolution to this story. This woman got away, and we never heard anything from the cops suggesting otherwise. Whenever I travel to the city for work, I petition my bosses to not put us up at this hotel. And whenever I am in a hotel, upon check-in I scour my room for any holes or crevices that could conceal a shady individual. So, while I have no closure to this tale at hand, I do have more baggage to bring with me on any subsequent trip I take. Thanks, lady. This story is about a decade old now. Some backstory. I'm from Australia and lived there during this event. At the time, my girlfriend, now wife, lived in another country, but was visiting me over Christmas break. I lived in a big city, which, if you drove about an hour in any direction, would either lead to another city or beautiful nature. My friends and I decided to take my girlfriend to see some of this beautiful nature, and we decided on a national park about an hour and a half from where we lived. This place is definitely no sort of secret location. It's very well known, but there are a ton of different areas to it, all with different rural and windy roads, taking you to the various areas of the park. We'd gone in 2 different cars, my friends in one, me and my girlfriend in another. That way we could have a little time together. We finished out the day of hiking and were heading home down one of the less common roads. I remember seeing this really beat up old 70s sedan with a wild looking dude in the driver's seat drive past us in the other direction. This wasn't uncommon, as there are a lot of smaller, less economically sound towns spattered around the area. But for some reason, he and his car stood out, and even my girlfriend noticed this as well. About 200 meters further down the very windy road, there was a pull-off area. Just a semicircle of gravel you could pull off and look out towards the ocean on. There was a camper van belonging to a company that mostly rented out colorful vans to backpackers parked there, with a woman standing in front of it. As soon as she sees us, she jumps out onto the road and flags us down. Now, I've read enough of these stories to know pulling in to help her on a quiet road might not be the safest idea. But back then, I hadn't, and my friends were in the car directly behind us, so I felt safe. Luckily, she wasn't the person that I didn't want to meet. She was quite obviously upset and scared when we pulled in. I told my girlfriend to wait in the car, and I got out to speak to this woman. She was nearly in tears. I can't remember where she was from, but it was a Central European country from memory, and she was touring around with her 4 or 5-year-old daughter at the time. She told me her van had broken down, and she'd pulled off there and called the van company's assistance line, and was just waiting for help. By this time, my friends had pulled in behind us, and a couple of them had gotten out to come over to see what was up. Apparently, a scary man had driven past her a few times already. First time, pulling over to offer to take her and her daughter to the nearest town for help. She thanked him and said no, and that she was waiting for the assistance vehicle to arrive. He left, but then kept driving past every 10 to 15 minutes in opposite directions, slowing down and looking at them before driving off once more. She begged us to stay with her while she waited for the assistance vehicle because this guy absolutely terrified her and her daughter. I agreed. My friends, being the awesome people they are, decided me and my girlfriend were enough, and they ditched us. Thanks, guys. We stayed with the woman for a little while before the car my girlfriend and I had seen earlier drove past, kinda slow, coming the opposite way we'd seen him the first time. As soon as he'd driven around the bend, the lady told us that was the scary man that she'd been seeing before we got there. This got my girlfriend and I to take her much more seriously after the feeling we got from the guy just seeing him on the road once. A few minutes later, he came back from the other direction and pulled into the parking area. Some more context. I am not an intimidating man. I'm tall-ish, but I have almost zero muscle and fairly soft features. So, there's not at all intimidating me, a terrified foreign woman, her tiny daughter, and my girlfriend, who doesn't look that intimidating, but is tough as nails, parked off a quiet road in a rural location with a not-so-nice looking dude pulling into where we were. Great. He gets out and is redneck as hell and definitely not friendly looking. No judgment on the redneck part. Definitely judging about the not friendly part. I come from a poorer country town north of our city, and those are my people. But hopefully, that sets a picture. He strolls over to us, and at this point, I walk towards him to put myself between the girls and him. I have no idea where this bravery came from, and I would definitely not describe myself as a brave person normally. He looks at the girls, and then at me, and asks if he can help. I tell him no, we were just waiting for the assistance vehicle, and tell him that we've got it covered. He then says maybe he could stay and wait with the woman and her daughter, so we didn't have to. I tell him that we're happy to stay, and thank him. But again, we've got it covered. He kind of just stood there for a while, staring at all of us, not really saying much, but definitely giving off mega creepy vibes. After what seemed like forever, another car drove past us and looked out, but they just kept going. This simple act seemed to startle him. He mumbled good luck and got in his car before driving off. We waited with this poor scared woman and her daughter for nearly an hour and a half. Ended up talking a lot, and hopefully we had made her opinions of Australians a little brighter after the mega creep, who did drive past once more about 10 minutes after he'd left us. Finally, the assistance vehicle arrived, with a bigger dude who could definitely handle himself in the driver's seat. I asked to see his ID and stuff to be safe, but he was in a car marked by the company, had all his tools, and certainly seemed legit. We gave the lady my number and asked her to text me when she was off safe. She was so grateful to us for staying with her for such a long time. Made me feel good that even if this dude was just a weird-looking, awkward country guy that didn't mean harm and was really just trying to help, we'd still made her feel more comfortable in a strange country. I don't think he was on the level, and definitely believe he was up to no good, but you never know. A few hours later, I got a message from her to say she was safe, so everything ended well. But creepy mountain dude, if we ever met again, it would be way too soon. So let's just not. My boyfriend, who I live with, works as a teacher in a town about 15 minutes away by train. He gets home more or less at the same time every day, give or take 30 minutes or so. I, on the other hand, work from home. In late January of this year, we'd gotten into a pretty big fight about something rather stupid. I can't even remember what it was about now, but it was one of those fights where we didn't speak to each other, text, call, or anything the whole next day. So this afternoon, I was lying in bed getting work done. I remember it was a Tuesday, and I was pretty sure his last class finished at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays, meaning he'd surely be home around 2:30. But around 1 p.m., I heard the front door open and shut. I thought, I guess he's home an hour early today. It was normal for him to skip his last class every once in a while, so I didn't really think much of it. In fact, I was mostly mentally preparing for the awkward post-fight, "Hey, how's it going?" conversation. So I continued to lie in bed and do my work and wait for him to come in and change his clothes. The bedroom door was closed and I had earplugs sort of half in, as I usually do when I'm working, but I could hear the heavy footsteps of him walking around the apartment, as he always does. If we hadn't been mid-fight and I wasn't so preoccupied with the awkwardness of it all, I might have noticed it was strange how slow the footsteps were or how long he spent walking around the living room. But I was caught up in the dramatics of the fight and didn't think twice about it. I was just lying there, waiting for him to finally come in. Finally, the bedroom door slowly opened, but just a few inches. I turned my head towards the door and prepared to give him a sort of awkward, "We've been fighting for 24 hours, huh?" smile. But the door didn't open more than a few inches. I looked and saw that it was a woman's hand with red nail polish on the doorknob. Whoever was there slowly closed the door just as they had opened it, without entering the room. I jumped out of bed, ripped out my earplugs, and sort of just froze there for a few seconds while trying to think rapidly. My first thought, that was not my boyfriend. Then I thought, could that have been his mom? His sister? The landlady, maybe? For some reason, I concluded that surely it was his mom or sister. So I opened the bedroom door and walked into the living room. There wasn't anyone there, but the room smelled heavily of women's perfume. Then I came to my senses and realized his mom and sister don't have keys, and they've never come over before. The landlady has never entered without permission. This was absolutely a stranger. I ran back into the bedroom and shut the door, now shaking heavily. There's a balcony connected to the bedroom, so despite the cold January rain, I stood on the balcony and called my boyfriend. He picked up and I asked him if his mom or sister might have come over unannounced. He told me, "No way that was either of them. Don't move. I'm calling the police." The police were there in minutes and searched the whole apartment. And of course, nobody was there by this point. It was weird though. Nothing was missing from the apartment, despite us keeping a jar full of money right in the entranceway. Nothing was even touched. In fact, it seemed like the intruder came straight to the bedroom, saw my legs on the bed, panicked, and left. Plus, you can't open that big wooden front door without a key. For a few days, my boyfriend and I were convinced it was just the landlady being nosy, and I began to feel a bit better. Nevertheless, we demanded that the landlady change our locks. When she came to change them with her husband, she made a discovery. There was a square area by the keyhole that had been scratched away with something. The landlady said surely someone used tools to break into the apartment that day. Then, a day or two later, my boyfriend told me, "I have to tell you something, but please don't freak out." He told me that the orange kitchen scissors were missing, and I obviously freaked out. I tore the apartment down to the studs looking for those scissors. It's been 6 months, and I've never seen those scissors again. So the whole thing is just creepy and weird. A stranger breaks into a nice apartment, but doesn't touch or take anything valuable, not even the money jar sitting right by the door. But they take scissors from the kitchen, head straight to the bedroom. When they see someone in bed, they immediately leave. I never got to meet the person who opened the door that day, and I hope that I never do. I'm a girl, and when I grew up, my mom was a horrible addict. She barely took care of me as a child. At the time of this incident, I was around 6 or 7, so my awareness and understanding of things happening may not totally make much sense. And this happened way back in the 90s. One night, my mother and I were on a car ride. I wasn't sure why we were driving because it was so late at night. Not sure what time it was, but I assume it was really late because there weren't many cars on the street and I was sleeping in the back seat. I don't even remember getting in the car. My mom drove up to some sketchy house and left me in the back seat for what felt like forever. when suddenly the car door swung open and someone violently grabbed me by the arm and yanked me out of the car. I started screaming and crying instantly until the man that had grabbed me looked me in the eyes and said, "Be quiet, don't try to run or I'll kill you." He had a scruffy beard and looked like a madman. I was scared to death, so I just shut my mouth and listened. He held me tight by my arm, shut the car door, and walked with me down the street. I looked back at the house my mom was in, praying that she would come to my defense, but that never happened. As we walked down the street, I wanted to cry, but I was in shock and fearful what would happen if I did. I didn't know what to do. If I sniffled or cried, the man would tighten his grip and yell at me. I can't even explain how scared and confused I was. We walked for a little while and ended up in the projects. The projects were a bunch of buildings crammed together in a neighborhood. We walked into one of the buildings and walked straight up a flight of stairs. My legs and feet hurt like hell, but I was too scared to stop moving or to try to complain. We walked up another flight of stairs when I saw some random guy smoking a cigarette in the stairwell. Then, without warning, the guy who had me by the arm fell to the ground in a heap. It all happened so fast, I didn't know how the kidnapper fell to the ground, but the next thing I remember, cigarette guy was punching and kicking the guy in the face and head. The kidnapper was out cold. Cigarette guy picked up the kidnapper by the back of his jacket and tossed him down the stairs. You have no idea how scary and violent it is to see an unconscious man fall down the stairs. And to this day, I still have a fear of falling downstairs. That man bled everywhere. I still have no idea how cigarette guy knew to help me, but I'm so glad that he did. Maybe he could see the tears in my eyes. Maybe he just picked up on something and had a bad vibe, but he acted instantly. The first second he could, he attacked the would-be kidnapper. Cigarette guy starts pacing back and forth, swearing at himself, gritting his teeth and clenching his fists. I thought he was mad at me, so I started to cry. He looked at me and said, Okay, shut up. He had an attitude, so I listened to him out of fear. I wasn't as scared of cigarette guy as much as the bearded guy, but I was still scared. He started to ask me questions with an attitude. Why are you out this late? Where are your parents? Why would you talk to strangers? I was in so much shock, I couldn't answer the man's questions correctly. He asked if I knew my way home, and I told him I didn't. I told him a broken story about what happened, and somehow with the information I gave him, he knew where my mom's car was. The only thing I remember about the road is passing a house with Christmas lights on it, despite it being well past Christmas at this point. I think he knew the area well enough and figured out where I needed to go from the information that I could give him, but I honestly don't even remember telling him about the Christmas lights. Anyway, he told me he would take me back if I promised over and over that I wouldn't tell the police that I saw him or anyone that looked like him, and he made me promise that I wouldn't even tell the police anything. He had an attitude. I didn't care what he asked me. I just wanted to get back to my mom, so I agreed. I followed him down the stairs. The bearded guy was still laying on the ground bleeding at the bottom of the stairs. He wasn't moving at all, and for all I knew, he was dead. And I hope now that he was. Cigarette guy stepped over the bearded guy, and I followed. We walked outside, and cigarette guy looked around panicky. I remember him telling me, "The police don't like me." We walked out of the projects. My feet still hurt. Cigarette guy was walking fast in a panic, and I basically had to jog to keep up with him. I started crying, and he asked what was wrong. I told him that my feet hurt, and I remember him sucking his teeth and picking me up with an attitude. He awkwardly cradled me in both arms, walked down the road for a bit. Then I remember him swearing and running behind a house or a building. A cop car was driving down the road. He had put me down and told me to run to the police car. I tried to run, but my legs could barely move, and I was still so scared. The cop car kept driving and rode away without seeing me before I could even get remotely close to it. Cigarette Man kept swearing to himself as he picked me up again and ran down the street. He took me behind a lot of houses and hid from every cop car that drove by. I assumed now that the police were looking for me. He carried me in both arms, running fast down the road, until I saw my mom at her car in the distance. She was surrounded by police. Cigarette Guy put me down and told me to run to the police. I got so excited that the pain in my legs just disappeared. And as he put me down, he ran away and disappeared himself. I ran towards the police and my mom. My mom picked me up and hugged me tightly. At this point, the police started to ask me and my mom questions. I don't remember too much about their questions, but I remember my mom telling the police some convoluted story that just didn't make any sense. She basically told me to not say a thing, and I didn't say much, but I did cry the whole time. We went home. Days later, my dad picked me up, and he knew that something was wrong. I told him everything. And from that point on, I never lived with my mom again. When I grew up and had time to think about that day, I never forgave my mother. Not too long ago, I asked my dad what he remembers about the situation, and he told me what he thinks happened from what I explained to him years ago. He said that he thinks my mom was on a drug binge. I got kidnapped. Someone saved me, but the person that saved me had warrants. And he wasn't mad at me. He was just frustrated with the situation that he had to deal with. Imagine being a criminal on the run, and now you have a kidnapped girl with you, and you just beat a guy half to death. If he would have gotten caught with me, he could be in jail for my kidnapping. With my mom lying and me being in shock and confused, I wouldn't be able to tell them that that was the man that helped me, because while it was all happening, I didn't even know that he was helping me. To the man that saved me that night, thank you so much. To the man that tried to kidnap me, while I hope you're around no longer, if you are, let's still not meet. This happened a couple of years ago. I, a 26-year-old female, was walking my dog Indy in my local field. It was dark, but it wasn't late. It was wintertime in the UK, so maybe 6 p.m. The field is mainly used for rugby/football, but is completely free to walk through whenever you'd like. It is also surrounded by houses and streetlights on the roads, but the field itself is dark, so I brought my flashlight with me, mainly so I wouldn't unknowingly step in any dog shit. I've come in one entrance of the field, and I'm following a path that leads to another exit or entrance, depending on how you use it. I use the field to make a loop back around onto the road and back towards my house, giving my dog some off-lead time whilst in the field. Anyway, as I'm walking up the field, I notice a figure walk in the entrance that I was going to use to leave. I keep my eye on this figure as they have very dark clothing on and their hood is up. I'm shining my flashlight as I'm walking, so I know the person knows that I'm there, as it's very obvious. At first, I wasn't so nervous, more so just being vigilant. Indy is a wonderful German Shepherd, so as you can imagine, I feel pretty safe with her. It wasn't until I saw the person duck down behind a bush that I absolutely froze up. I was maybe about 200 feet from the exit, but would have to walk right past the bush they hid behind to get to it. I call Indy over and get her back on the lead so she is close by. At this point, she is also hyper alert due to the person behind the bush. With that, I hear a weird, high-pitched voice that sounded like they were saying my dog's name. I can only assume that they heard me call her. They said it maybe 3 or 4 times in this long, drawn-out, high-pitched voice. It's clearly coming from the person hiding. Luckily, Indy wasn't reacting to it, as it probably barely sounded like her name to her. I had a moment of, shall I fight or flight? Either I, 1, run past the bush and try my best for the exit. 2, turn around and run back into the dark field and make for the other exit, which is a lot further away. Or 3, confront this motherfucker. Indy at this point is hackles up, ears up, and very alert in front of me. all while still maintaining a wonderful sense of calm. I went with option number 3. I confronted that motherfucker. I mustered up every bit of courage and confidence that I had and shouted at the top of my voice, "What the f*** are you doing?" The hooded man emerged from the bush very quickly without saying anything, and I said the same thing again. "What the f*** are you doing trying to scare a young woman?" I'm so glad my voice didn't shake or break when I said it, as I truly was terrified at that moment. He started to stutter and said, "Oh, I thought you were someone I knew." I answered back and said, "Who the f*** hides from someone they think they know in a dark field?" After that, he apologized a couple of times and continued to skulk down the rest of the field. Me and Indy took this as a moment to make our quick escape. God knows what his intentions were. Maybe he thought I had a smaller dog and was going to try to attack me. Maybe he saw Indy and realized there was no chance of that. Or maybe he really did think I was someone he knew. Whatever it was both weird and scary. Given the fact that he hid behind foliage in the pitch black, I don't get the feeling that this was an innocent mistake. I guess I'll never know. And to be honest, I'm A-okay with that outcome. I was raised in a fairly strict but loving Christian household in a Bible Belt section of the United States. My parents weren't at all unreasonable in their rules and were well-intentioned, but I broke a few along the way like most teenagers do. The summer before I started college, I began a relationship with a slightly older guy. I knew him from high school, and he was attending the college that I would soon be at. Johnny was a catch. He was exceptionally handsome, had been on the football team, and was on a full academic scholarship. Funny, talented, and very personable. There was little not to like about him. We bonded over our teetotalism and love of pranking. The best part, he had his own apartment at the college, which was a 4-hour drive from my parents' house. I could easily sneak up there under the guise of visiting one of my other friends or spending the night at a local girlfriend's house. My parents didn't even know that I had a boyfriend. Now, I had just turned 18 and was enjoying my rebellious streak and newfound freedom. But I still lived happily under my parents' guidance and rules for the most part. They always encouraged me to be a free thinker and to ultimately figure out my own morals and values, and I ended up much like them, because they're honestly that awesome. My mom, wisely, encouraged me not to just sleep with anyone, and it was something I actually held to quite strongly. So while I had no qualms having sleepovers with my boyfriend, I was intent on not having sex with him. He took it pretty well and seemed to respect my decision. One week, smack dab in the middle of summer, I had 3 days off in a row at work. A drive up to see Johnny was in order, and I began my travel early in the morning. He was excited to see me, and we had a great day. Nerf gun wars, reading Stephen King, making out. We went out for dinner and returned for a night of shenanigans, or so I thought. Upon entering his apartment, Johnny produced a box of condoms. He had tried this before, so I wasn't fazed, and adamantly told him that it wasn't happening. The events that unfolded following this seemingly unimportant interaction still haunt me today. Johnny's smile disappeared in an instant, and his eyes went cold, hauntingly cold. I was sitting at his dining room table with my back against the wall. He was standing at the other end of the small table. "You make me sick. I'm sick of you. All you do is play. You just try to play me." We were serial pranksters and sarcastic in every sense of the word. While his countenance made my skin crawl, I knew he was joking. I had known Johnny for years, after all. "I've thought about this for a long time, and you're dead. I'm not doing this anymore. You make me sick. I hate you, and you're dead." He was unnervingly calm, and his voice portrayed a slight hint of anger that I'd never heard before. I noticed him clenching his fists, popped out veins tracing up his arms. For the first time in our entire relationship, I felt unsafe with him. He held my gaze, unblinking. His second-floor apartment was on campus. It was summer. I had seen nobody else in the building, no other cars in the parking lot, and even if I could get past him, which I couldn't, my two options were unlocking the balcony door and jumping, or racing 15 feet down the hallway to the dead-bolted front door, which opened inwardly, just to get down a flight of stairs. Either scenario led to an empty parking lot. I would have to get to my car or run into the woods nearby, and while I was athletic, I had no chance against him physically. I focused on him. Half of me knew that he was kidding. He just had to be. He would break into laughter any second now, and we would return to our beautiful day. But he continued talking. I can't repeat what he said. It was too graphic and specific to our location to write out in a public forum. He detailed the sexual assault he had in store for me. If I survived, I would be strangled in the nearby woods, then carted off and dumped at a secluded spot that we had explored together. He motioned to some bags he had on his counter. That's where your body will be within the hour. I had enough. His plan was too well thought out to be impromptu. I'm small, but I'm stubborn, and would fight to the death if I had to. I also have a wicked straight face when I need to. It was my turn to hold his gaze with all the ferocity I could muster. I stood up and said the first thing that came to mind. I'm still proud of my unflinching calm that I presented. Inside, though, I was begging God not to let me die. Oh, you're real funny. I almost believed you for a second. Wouldn't have worked anyways, because I was going to tell you before all that my dad asked me to come home tonight. He needs help first thing in the morning with the garden for Mom's birthday, because my brother hurt his back, and I told him I'd call him as soon as I was on the road, within half an hour. It was a lie, and not a particularly good one, but the delivery was convincing. I dangled my phone in his face and told him that he could explain to my dad why I wasn't coming home tonight if he wanted me to stay that badly. Johnny's mouth was agape as he stared back at me. I was just kidding, he mumbled, fists still clenched. See ya, I chirped, pushing right past him. My gamble had paid off. I grabbed my purse and shuffled down the hallway. I could feel his eyes burning through me, and the electric energy in the room as I internally screamed at myself to move slowly. The deadbolt disengaged, I walked out, and fought every urge to run down the stairs. I was too far from my car, that if he chased me, I'm pretty sure that I couldn't beat him, and I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me scared. I walked the entire length of the car park. I've always had a habit of parking as far out as possible. Next to the woods he told me that he would murder me in. I knew he was watching me the entire time. I could feel his eyes follow my every movement. As I drove out, past his apartment, I saw his shadow in the balcony window. I waved. He just stared. I drove a few miles to the nearest Walmart. It was only 8 p.m., and the sun was just beginning to set. People milled through the parking lot, blissfully unaware of what I'd just gone through. I collapsed onto my steering wheel and broke down, bawling my eyes out. Then I drove the 4 hours back home. Stupidly, I didn't know how to process what happened and just banished it to the edges of my mind. I spent the next few years avoiding Johnny. The few times I thought about it, I blamed myself for being so naive. I finally told my mom 4 years after the fact and was able to start processing through it. So, possible murderer ex-boyfriend, who thankfully now lives about 10,000 miles away from me. Let's be sure to not ever meet again. I'm going to start by saying that this was a widely publicized case, so a few details will be changed, but the main part of this story is accurate. A few years ago, I worked at a popular hookah lounge in my town. We had many regulars, so of course I got to know many people and made some lasting friendships with a few. Among those regulars was a group of people I wasn't terribly fond of, except one girl, Rachel. Rachel was a kind girl who I enjoyed talking to. I just didn't approve of the people she hung out with, or the decisions she made. But it was her life, so what place did I have to say anything? Eventually, Rachel started dating another regular named Ben, who was part of my friend group. This is when we got a lot closer, and she started to trust me and confide in me more. Eventually, Rachel and Ben broke up, and it devastated Rachel. I clearly remember her messaging me to hang out and her crying on my shoulder for more than a half an hour. During their relationship, Rachel stopped hanging around with the shady people as much. But of course, afterwards, she went back to them and started partying a lot and doing only God knows what. She stopped talking to me as much and eventually started dating some other guy in the shady group named Greg. Of course, that relationship went south, due to reasons unknown to me. But Rachel ended up filing for a restraining order against this Greg. A few days later, Rachel goes missing, and unfortunately she was never heard from again. It was awful. Her family started showing up to talk to me, asking if I'd seen her. I hadn't, but apparently someone told them that she was seen downtown somewhere, and it broke my heart. One day, during a busy shift, someone we both talked to sometimes showed up and talked to me about Rachel's disappearance. His name is POS. POS said that he had heard that she had been seen somewhere and wanted to know what I knew about it. He even asked me if I'd heard if anything bad happened to her. I'm assuming he thought, since I worked at a regular hangout spot of hers, that I'd heard something. I told him I hadn't, and we hugged before he walked off to talk to other people. Several months passed before I heard anything about Rachel. Her family showed up from time to time asking about her, but nothing changed. Around a year after her disappearance, the police had a breakthrough in her case, and sadly, her body was found. After some investigating, the police discovered that Greg had hired POS to kill Rachel, and he did just that. He hid her body and continued his life as usual. The fact that I spoke to POS after the fact and even hugged him still weighs in my conscience. It's been years and I'm still so upset about it. He's in prison and I'll likely never see him again, but that doesn't take away from the hurt. I spoke to her family about her, having hugged the man who killed her. I wish I had been a better friend to her. Maybe I could have saved her. I could have insisted that she not hang out with those people. I don't blame myself for her murder, but I do wish I could have done something. Done more. Had I been a more insistent friend, maybe she'd still be here. Who knows? All I know is that if for whatever reason I ever do see him again, it won't be a good thing for him. He knew she was dead, and he still asked me if I'd seen her or heard anything about her. POS, I hope you never see the light of day. And moreover, I hope you suffer every minute of your pitiful existence. I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I live alone in the apartment that I've called home for the past 4 years. I live just outside a major city in the United States, and for all intents and purposes, I would consider where I reside to be pretty safe. But after what happened, I really question just how safe anywhere can truly be. I was asleep one night last week, wrapped up tight in bed, when a faint but incessant sound jolted me awake. My first instinct was to grab my phone, thinking that maybe it was an app or an alarm that I had forgotten about. But the only thing that greeted me on my phone was the clock saying 2:37 a.m. As I gained my senses, I realized that the sound is not coming from within my room, but from down the hall. It's the sound of a consistent knock on my front door. I sit up and am instantly chilled by this because who in their right mind is knocking on anyone's door, let alone mine, at this hour? I don't have a Ring camera, otherwise I check who it is from the safety of my bed. But since that isn't the case, I get up to check out who it could be. I bring my phone with me as I silently creep down the hallway towards the tapping. As I hit the halfway point down the hall, the knocking becomes faster and louder, sounding almost frantic. And that's when the feeling that something isn't quite right first presents itself. As I get closer, I can hear a muffled voice coming from right outside my door. It sounds like a young woman, and she's pleading, "Help me, they're coming. Please help me." This sends a chill of utter fear through me as I'm now frozen where I stand, no more than about 6 feet from that deadbolted door. As I snap back, my first instinct is to want to help whoever is on the other side. Her pleas tear at me, and I can't help but to be sympathetic. But I also couldn't shake this feeling of dread that coursed through me. I pre-dial 911 on my phone, but hold off from hitting call just yet. And that's when the knocking stops. Now, here's the thing. I only heard knocking at my door, which is odd because there are 4 apartments in this block, and if there were some emergency, I'd imagine the person seeking help would be seeking it from anybody and everybody. In addition, I live on the 3rd floor, and I can't see anyone venturing up several flights of stairs to specifically seek help at my door, unless something here isn't lining up. I creep to the door and press my eye to the peephole. I'm not sure what I was expecting to see, but it certainly wasn't this. Nothing. Just near darkness. No woman, no person, no anything. There's an outdoor light by my unit, but the way that it sits, it just doesn't hit my door with anything more than a faint glow. I stay at the door, recounting what I heard and how this could be, when from just outside of my view from the door emerges a large black figure. I have to hold back a gasp because it actually frightened me. But as I keep my eyes trained on it, I'm able to tell that it's a man, a rather large man at that. It looks like he's wearing a sweatsuit or something dark that covers him from head to toe. I can't see anything identifying on him, but the way that he moved down the stairs silently, as I believe he stared unshakingly at my door, still sends chills down my spine. I stood there for a minute longer, still silent, although I felt myself shaking, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. And no matter how I added up the details, it didn't seem like anything innocent. The pleas of a woman that wasn't there, what I believe now to be a recording, a large man in black off in the shadows, and all the efforts to get me to open my door. I placed the call to 911, and they urged me not to answer the door. They'd send somebody out, and within 10 minutes, I did see police car spotlights flood the parking lot of my complex, but no one ever contacted me to say that they found someone or anything like that. After a few sleepless hours, I went to the leasing office and explained what had happened and asked if anyone else had said that they encountered something like this in the complex. But the leasing agent said that no one else had reported anything. And now this just leaves me with even more questions. Who was this at my door? Why me? It doesn't seem random given all the things I've laid out. So does that mean I'm being watched? I don't even want to think about this last one, but I just can't help but wonder. What would have happened to me if I did open the door that night? Years ago, I pushed really hard to make sure my daughter got a cell phone at a pretty early age, around 12 years old. My former spouse did not really understand why this was such a big deal to me. I could not really explain it at the time, but I had a reason why, and I needed her to have a phone. And part of it was from my own experience as a 14-year-old babysitter. I loved babysitting for Jack and Diane. Not only were they the coolest couple ever, but their kids were sweet and so fun. They had a little toddler boy, Matt, and John, the baby. Jack was a biker, and he often picked me up on his Harley, which was the most amazing thing ever. And his wife loaned me a lot of her leather clothes to wear to rock concerts. They went out partying a lot, and the job itself paid pretty well. It was like a dream job to a teenager. They were out clubbing one night, and I'd put Matt to bed and rocked John off to sleep. It was a cold evening, so they had taken the Mercedes instead of the bike, and it was late. Even with checking on the sleeping kids regularly, I was getting sleepy myself. It was never really an issue. They didn't mind at all if I dozed off to sleep, which is what happened this night. I woke up with a start, heart pounding. I have no idea what woke me up. Neither kid had come out, and there was no discernible noise. But for whatever reason, I was now wide awake and terrified. I had just gotten my panic under control when I heard a car door slam shut. I looked out the window and saw that they were home, so I went to open the front door. Diane came rushing in, and one side of her face was horribly swollen and she was bleeding profusely. Stupidly, I asked, "Did you get into a fight?" She raced past me to the phone at the dining room table and began dialing. It was an old tabletop style of phone. Jack came in next, flying right past me and screaming. He grabbed the heavy phone receiver from her hand and bashed the side of her head in, blood splattering across the wall. She screamed back, holding her very bloody face. Then he smashed her head into the wall. She staggered backwards, gushing blood into the bedroom, out of sight. I heard more screaming and ugly sounds of blows landing when she came tumbling out of the bedroom, thrown through the hallway into the crib, waking up John. She crawled out of the room as he cried, and Jack dragged her into the hallway and screamed at the baby to shut up. I was terrified and didn't know what to do, so I went and grabbed the baby, cuddling him and turning him away from the image of his dad, straddling his mother and choking her. The silence as he settled was almost scarier than the screaming. Was she dead? I got John settled again and came back out into the living room. I didn't know what to do. Diane lay on the floor, broken, bleeding, barely recognizable, but somehow still breathing. Jack told me to sit down as he dialed a number on his cell phone. I slowly perched on the edge of the couch. Diane crawled to me, then, gurgling words past the blood, she begged me to protect her babies. I just kept thinking that I was just a kid too. Soon, a bunch of Jack's buddies were there. A few of them said they would take Diane to the hospital. Jack asked if I would stay with the kids. Diane started screaming that if I stayed, Jack would whip and kill me. I said I just wanted to go home. One of the guys said he would call his wife to stay with the kids, and they left with Diane. Jack looked at me and told me to get into the car. He would take me home. I had no way to call for help or a different ride. The whole way home, I just tried to stay calm. The turn to my street was at the bottom of a dip. We approached the turn as Jack kept telling me how he didn't want to go back to prison, how he would do anything to not go back. I just kept nodding and agreeing as he took his foot off the brake and drove right past the turn. I looked at him, horrified. "I just want to talk. I need to calm down before I go home to my kids, okay?" We ended up at an all-night donut shop. He had a coffee and a donut, got me a little something too, and spent more than the next hour telling me how he was not a bad guy. Prison had changed him. I was less than 5 miles from home, but no way to call for help, and no one knew where I was. I just tried to be supportive and agreed with everything he said. He paid me $50, which was a lot for back then. Finally, we got back into the car, and he drove me home. It was one of the longest nights ever. I woke up to a police cruiser outside my house. Diane had refused to press charges. About a week later, I got a letter from her, apologizing for everything, taking all of the blame. Sometimes, I wonder if she left before he killed her. I wonder if those sweet kids grew up to be good people. So that is one reason why I made sure that my daughter would always have a way to call for help. I'm a 24-year-old male and have lived on my own for about 2 years now. I have a very small bungalow that I'm able to pretty comfortably afford. In my place, I have an attic area. At a guess, I would say that it's about 5 by 5 meters in size, and you can only really stand in there at the very center. Anyway, I work the night shift at a factory, basically just sit on my phone all night, so I usually get in at around 8 a.m. I was coming home last Thursday morning during a heavy storm, and I got into the house and just conked right to sleep. When I woke up, I went on my phone and saw that I was so tired that I hadn't even checked my notifications. I have a Ring camera outside my door, which shows me anybody that may have stopped by my front door. I saw that it had been tripped at 7:42 a.m., although I got into the house at around 8:15 a.m. I checked the video and saw that it was a man. He was pressed right up to the door and was fumbling around with the handle. He did this for about 10 seconds until he spotted the camera. Once he did, he very quickly scuttled away. This unsettled me, but it didn't entirely creep me out or anything. I got up to go make some food and discovered something in my kitchen. The back window was open. I, of course, instantly began having the thoughts of a home intruder, but slowly chilled out as I convinced myself that maybe I had left it open. The rest of the day consisted of this, just noticing small things that didn't seem right and scaring myself. All up until a point that I leave for my shift at 10 p.m. and I was watching some TV at around 9 o'clock. I spotted something that made my heart leap into my throat. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see it. The attic entrance had slowly began sliding open. I can so vividly remember that I began questioning my sanity. Surely I was just hallucinating or something. I looked over at it and absolutely saw something that made me so much more scared. I saw fingers wrap around the hatch and begin moving it more. I didn't know what to do. I could feel the panic beginning to really get to me, and I wasn't sure if I should leave the house and call the police, or if I should try to yell at whoever was up there. I chose a mixture of both. I began dialing 999 and ran to my bedroom where I could lock the door. As soon as I began running, I heard the hatch get almost torn off with the speed that they moved it with as I arrived at my bedroom door. I looked down the corridor and watched for a second, seeing only a little slice of blackness up in my attic. And that's when I saw the human hand still holding onto the sides of my ceiling. I yelled, "Whoever is there, I'm calling the police, and I have a gun. I do not in fact own a gun. If you take a step out of there, I will f***ing shoot you." The adrenaline was really making my hands and voice shake, but I tried sounding as tough as I possibly could. Then I saw something that I truly don't think I will ever forget. The hand slipped back into the dark, and then the person dropped down. I slammed my door shut and locked it as quickly as I could. The call went through, and I was able to get on the line with the police as they dispatched officers to my house. I told them I didn't know if the man was armed or not, and the dispatcher told me to stay on the line. I heard the man walking up to my door and rattling at the door handle. He also seemingly went through my cupboards and my kitchen, as I heard a lot of commotion coming from there. Truth be told, I don't know why he stayed. I would have just left the house, but he stayed right up until the police came in, and they arrested him there on the spot. Apparently, he was a homeless man and was armed with a knife from my kitchen. He had recently been seen in the area, trying to make his way into other houses. Truth be told, I'm still pretty frightened to be in my own house now. I now sleep with my bedroom door locked and all my windows shut. I also sleep with a knife tucked right under my pillow. I know that this is unlikely to happen ever again, but I just cannot forget the way he dropped straight down from my attic. So that's the story of the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I made this account just to tell this story, because I felt like if I could tell it, maybe it would feel less real. Maybe it would feel more like a story. I don't know. I guess only time will tell on that front. I'm 32, and this incident happened nearly a decade ago now, although I still remember it like it happened last week. I had just moved into my very first apartment and was still in the process of offloading boxes, organizing, and just setting up my new living space. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed, so I was heading to the entrance of the apartment complex to check my mail while I was talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening up the mail and still using the phone. Handling multiple tasks at once proved to be a little too much for me, and at one point, my phone slipped from between my ear and my shoulder and landed with a thud on the hardwood floor of my bedroom. As phones tend to do, it didn't land and stick, but it slid underneath my bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch out to get it. As I'm practically crawling underneath my bed to find my phone, something catches my eye. It's a pile of clothes beneath my bed that I didn't recognize. It's a sweater and jeans that don't belong to me. As my eyes become affixed on these clothes, I realize then that it's not just a pile of clothes beneath my bed. It's a full-on person beneath my bed. My eyes widen, and I have to choke back the urge to scream. This person was lying completely still, with his back towards me, and his head tucked neatly into his chest, so I couldn't see his face. I realized that he couldn't see me either. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked the phone back up and said, "Sorry, I dropped the phone. I'm just going to take a shower and call you back real quick." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, and promptly jumped out my window. My apartment is on the first floor. After I hit the ground, I called the police. They told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and to see if anyone comes out the door to the apartment complex while I waited. This was during the summer, and it was still very much light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend, and he made it to me just before the police did. I handed over my keys to them, and they went inside. Only a few moments later, 2 cops come out holding a thin, tired-looking man, his eyes wild and crazy, but he didn't try to get away from them. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house, I was a mess, both shivering and crying, told me that when they had entered the apartment, the man was standing with his face pressed against the bathroom door, appearing as if he were waiting for me to come out of it. In his left hand while he waited was a knife that he had taken from the block in my kitchen. To the best of their reasoning, they surmised that he had somehow slipped through my front door while I was getting my mail and proceeded to hide right beneath my bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. I didn't really know what to do with this story at the time that it happened, but today I wanted to share it so that others might know what to do if in a situation just like this. The police told me that what I did was truly amazing and really well thought out. If I had screamed, this could have ended really badly for me. Like I said, this all happened in the early 2010s, and while I don't expect it to present itself again, what kind of story would this be if I didn't finish it with "Man hiding underneath my bed"? I can only hope that we never meet again. A little context. I grew up my entire childhood without a present father. When I turned 15, I got really into hunting and just enjoyed guns in general. My uncle is an avid hunter, gun builder, and ammunition reloader. He loves to hunt. This was a common interest that made us become very close. He was my father figure and taught me a lot that made me the man that I am today. Now, for the story. My uncle's father lives in Montana, which allowed us to get resident pricing on big game hunting tags. Once a year, we would head up to his property and hunt for the week. Usually, this would go off without a hitch, and if we were lucky, we would get the shot we were looking for. Unfortunately, not this year. Just like every year, we headed up to his father's property in northern Montana, and that night, we headed out to set up some hunting cameras. That way, we'd know if there were deer in the area, and we'd know if it was a good place to hunt or not. It must have been 1 a.m., and we were driving down this 2-lane dirt road, headed right into the woods. We were always the only people on the road, since it was so early in the morning. This particular night, we saw headlights approaching from behind us, but thought nothing of it. We figured they must have been doing the same thing as us. Well, after tailing us for some time, the headlights disappeared, which was strange since there were no turns off of this particular road. A few seconds go by, and all of a sudden, we see a truck driving on the shoulder to our right with their lights off. The shoulder was a small hill with brush and a fence fairly close to it. Definitely something that nobody should be driving on. The truck speeds up and gets back on the road, turns its lights back on, and speeds off into the darkness. This set off some red flags, but we figured they were just impatient and didn't want to follow us all the way to their destination. No big deal, or so we thought. We drove down the road for a few more miles until we saw taillights stopped in the middle of the road. It was a truck that had passed us a few miles back. They had set up traffic cones to completely block the road off, and there was another truck parked on the shoulder. We figured that they must have broken down, so we stopped. I had read an article online earlier this year about people in other countries that would make roadblocks to rob and kill people for their vehicles and belongings. I laughed and started to tell my uncle about this article when 2 men from each truck jumped out of their vehicles and began to approach ours. My uncle always kept 2 handguns on shoulder holsters under his arms when we were out doing these kinds of things. I firmly believe that this saved our lives. 2 of the men stayed at the tailgate of the truck parked on the road, and the other 2 men came up to my uncle's window. At this point, my uncle has his right hand in his jacket with his hand holding the gun. The men were extremely friendly and said that the truck on the shoulder had broken down, and they were just trying to help him out. They asked if my uncle knew anything about cars, and if he could come take a look at the problem. My uncle flat out refused to leave his truck, and me in it. And this made the men angry. Both instantly drew pistols, and one of the men rounded the front of the truck towards my window. My uncle grabbed the man's gun that was pointed at him, which he forgot to load a round into. Luckily for us, my uncle pulled his gun out, shot the man in the shoulder, slammed on the gas, driving on the left shoulder past all of these men. I peered back as we made haste and could see the other 3 men gathering around the man that my uncle shot. We drove and drove and drove for what seemed like an eternity without saying a single word to each other. We drove straight back to his dad's house, and he told me that it was time to go to bed. He called the police and explained to them what had happened. They sent out 2 officers to the house to take a statement and mentioned to him that they had had quite a few reports of roadblocks being set up all around northern Montana. They were able to catch all 4 of the men who stopped us that night, due to the fact that the guy who was wounded was hurt badly enough that he had to be taken to the hospital. When the party couldn't give a reason as to why their buddy had a bullet lodged in him, the police were called and were able to take them all down easily. Up until this point, I had always felt like the backwoods of Montana were like a second home to me, but that image was shattered in just a single night. I'm incredibly thankful that my uncle came prepared, because thinking back, there's just no telling where we'd be now if he hadn't been. I don't know if this fits the classic creepy story mold, but this is an experience that I've carried with me since I was a child. I woke up early one Saturday morning when I was about 12 and overheard my parents talking about how to break their divorce news to me. Eventually, I crept downstairs. My mom told me that she fell out of love with my dad and stayed with him, quote, for your sake, then divorced him when she felt that I was old enough to handle it. My dad just nodded along to confirm the story. My parents approached it as if they were the most woke, self-aware, emotionally controlled people ever, and were having a very mutual and agreeable split. It was for the best, and it was something we were going to do together as a family. But I did think that it was kind of odd that my mom had a boyfriend almost immediately. He was an artist friend of hers, and he was also going through a divorce with his wife, who suffered from bipolar disorder and had aggressive episodes. My mom was really open with me about private details like this. One night, just a couple of months after they started the divorce process, my parents were both out and I was home alone. The perks of being an only child, I suppose. The phone rang, and there was this strange woman on the phone. "Hello, is this?" She called me by my name. I didn't recognize her voice, neither as somebody that I'd ever spoken to before or a family friend or anything like that. But she did sound as if she was wavering in her speech, almost as if she was scared. I said, "Yeah, who is this?" "This is a friend of your mother's. Are your parents home?" I told her that I didn't want to tell her that. "Oh, it's okay, don't be scared. I just wanted to ask, did you know your mom doesn't love your dad?" This caught me completely off guard, and I responded with, I don't think I want to talk to you." "Don't be rude," she snapped. "If you hang up, I'll tell your parents. Listen, did you know your mom's been cheating on your dad? It's been going on a long time. She doesn't love him, and she's a bad person." I started to cry into the phone receiver. The woman seemed to suddenly realize how fucked up this all was and tried to apologize, angrily demanding that I accept her apology and promise not to tell my parents. I didn't reply, so she started begging me not to tell a soul. She's also crying at this point. I eventually realized that I could hang up on her, so I did. The phone rang back almost immediately after I hung up, but I was done with this. I didn't pick up. But that's when the phone rang in the secret pattern that my mom and I used. 2 rings, hang up, and call back. It was my mom calling because she's freaking psychic, and it's sometimes spooky. When I answered the phone, all my mom said was, "What happened?" She knew something was wrong before she even picked up the phone to call. I told her that a lady had called and told me that she didn't love Dad anymore. I kind of managed to make a joke along the lines of, "No duh, that's why you're getting a divorce." I began crying again, but I told her I was okay. My mom told me that it was probably her boyfriend's soon-to-be ex-wife, and she was just a sad, bitter woman acting out in the only way she knew how. But that doesn't make it okay. My mom said she was coming home immediately and hung up. As soon as I hung up on my end, the phone began ringing again and rang straight for the next 5 minutes. I knew it was the woman calling back. I assumed to cry and beg me some more. I later found out from my mom's boyfriend, who passed along a message from her, that she was very sorry and knew that what she'd done was wrong. Cool, okay, that helps now, I guess. My mom got home soon after, and I told her about the woman calling back. She told me we were going to look into reporting it as harassment and potentially get a restraining order. We even went down to the police station, got all swept up in that, and I could never bring myself to tell her the rest of what that woman said. We've been open and honest about everything else, but this. She even later came clean about the affair on her own, and I had to feign surprise. She wanted to tell me when I was an adult, so that I could more fully understand where she was coming from. There was a lot more going wrong in the marriage, but she didn't want me to see her as the bad guy. What she doesn't know is that I've known since I was a child, and yeah, there is a part of me that sees it like that, but that would destroy her. I've kept this experience at least partially hidden for years at this point, but every now and again, I look back on it and examine it under the light of adulthood, and it's times like those that I'm made ever aware of just how messed up this was on several layers. Part of me is sympathetic to that woman. I'm sure her life was falling apart in front of her, and her mental illness didn't make anything any better. But to call the child of the new significant other of your ex to lay this baggage on them is pretty low. I mean, even for the mafia, children are off limits. I don't know what became of this woman, and I do hope that she got some help for all the things that she had going on. But I find it wild that even after years and years, that a 20-second phone call can still inhabit my thoughts every so often. This happened quite a while ago when I was home alone with just my dog. After all this time, I'm sure that what happened was really strange, and while I have no idea what this person wanted, I can only assume the worst. So I was watching TV one night at about 11 p.m. when I heard a car pull up outside and the engine shut off. I figured it was obviously a neighbor, but my nosy dog wanted to have a look and went to the window. He'd kind of messed up the blinds when he went to look, so I got up to fix them. When I did, I noticed a car parked on the street across from my house and my neighbor's house. I couldn't really make out any details, but it looked like the driver was still sitting in the car. Once again, I didn't really think much of it. I got a drink and went back to watching TV. Quite a while had passed since I fixed the blinds, but I'm not quite sure how long. I'd guess about 15, maybe 20 minutes. Out of nowhere, I thought I heard a tapping at the door. Not a knock. It was much lighter and much more quiet. My dog sat straight up to look at the door, and I paused the TV when the same tapping then began at the window. I opened the blinds just a crack and saw a man standing there. I couldn't make out his face properly, and he immediately walked back to the door and began tapping at it once more. Now, admittedly, this doesn't sound very frightening, and I can't tell you why, but at that moment, I had this awful feeling of dread set down right over me. I felt absolutely terrified, and I had no clue as to why. The tapping at the door never stopped, but something in my head said, if I opened the door, then something really bad was going to happen. I went upstairs to open a window to ask what this person wanted. It felt safer doing this. The man said in a really quiet voice that he was delivering pizza and told me how much it cost. At this moment, I felt a bit stupid for being so frightened about a food delivery, but I told him that I didn't order pizza. I guessed he was speaking quietly and knocking lightly so he wouldn't disturb my neighbors. My dog had followed me upstairs and was letting out the odd growl and bark, which is really unusual for him. I was doing my best to settle my dog when the man downstairs told me that he indeed had the correct address, and I better get downstairs now and open the door to pay for what I owed and collect my food before it got cold. I was truly confused because I most definitely didn't order any food and began to tell him that when I noticed that he didn't have a pizza in his hand. I told him again that he had the wrong address, and that's when he got really angry. He kept telling me to open the door. He was going between angry and sort of trying to persuade me to go back downstairs. I asked him where the pizza was. He said very matter-of-factly, yet agitated, that he was holding it. It was really dark out, but he definitely didn't have anything in his hands. My dog was making quite a bit of a fuss at this point, and the stranger had turned into a broken record, come downstairs, and open the door. All the noise must have alerted my neighbor, who did open his front door, and the man didn't say a word, but practically sprinted back across the street to the car that I had heard pull up a while ago. He went back to the car empty-handed. I have no idea what he wanted, but he certainly wasn't a delivery driver. It really freaked me out as well that my dog is quite obviously a large breed, and the man saw him through the window, yet wasn't deterred at all from whatever he had planned. It seems even stranger and less random that he actually drove to my house as though he had planned on showing up. At this point, so far removed from this happening, I'm not sure if I was more frightened or weirded out at what was happening. The idea of having a stranger pull up and attempt to get you to open your door at nearly midnight is certainly creepy. To do it under the guise of delivering food as a means to make it seem like you have a reason to be there feels even more seedy. I'm glad I had the sense to not even crack the door that evening, and I encourage everyone to be sure who they're opening their home to before they even think of unlatching that door. This happened in the early 70s. My family, including my uncle by marriage, were all born and raised in a tiny area in the deep south. This story still gets told at family reunions, and I have full permission from my aunt and uncle to tell it, but I don't feel comfortable revealing any information such as where we're from. My uncle went away, fought in Vietnam, returned home, and he and my aunt, my dad's older sister, got married. While my uncle was in Nam, he said when something bad was going to happen, like something awful to one of his friends over there, or when there was a bad battle with his company, he could almost feel it. He spoke of there being this sense of dread that would sweep over the entire camp. Sometimes he would have that dread, like a feeling of burden, for a week or so before anything happened. Sometimes it would just be an hour or so, or anywhere in between. So here goes the story. It was January or February, and the weather had been unseasonably warm that year. My aunt and uncle had only been married a few months, and my uncle was heading out of town the following day for something job-related, and he was going to be gone for about 2 weeks. He and my aunt were not looking forward to being apart. So it's a Sunday, and they decided to make that day special. He went to church with her, which was something he rarely did, and they decided to splurge and eat at one of our great seafood restaurants. And then afterward, they were going to walk on the beach together. My aunt said they were having such a great time that day. They had seen old friends at church, the restaurant was really good. It was just one of those days where everything seemed to be going right. On the way to the beach they were headed to, my uncle said he was beginning to have that same sense of dread that he had when he was in the war. Although he didn't want to spoil my aunt's fun, he thought he was having a flashback, or what we now call PTSD. He was trying not to take it seriously, but he said the sense of foreboding was particularly bad. They got to the beach, and to explain something about this particular beach, you had to park beside the road and walk across a wide expanse of sand to get to the water. This beach was very secluded, especially at this time of year. My aunt was walking in her stocking feet, collecting shells and having a great time. She loved the beach, and she still does. They saw another young couple walking as well. My aunt and uncle didn't know them, although they seemed like late teens in age. Anyway, my uncle said that he couldn't fight that bad feeling any longer. He grabbed my aunt by the arm and said, "We've got to get out of here." She got mad. She wasn't ready to go yet, and he was dragging her across the sand towards their car as they were arguing the whole way. He didn't tell her what was wrong because he even felt he was probably having a flashback, but he said he felt 100% better once they were in the car and headed home, and my aunt got over being mad. As they were driving home though, my aunt and uncle both recall seeing a big car, and it had 4 hippie-type guys in it. They passed them on the road, and it looked like that big car was heading towards the beach. Fast forward a day, there's a story in the newspaper. My uncle realized why he was having such a bad feeling. These 4 guys kidnapped the other couple that my uncle and aunt saw out there on the beach. The guys were actually local men, and my aunt and uncle had gone to school with a couple of them. The 4 guys were on some kind of drug, and they put the guy in the trunk, and they took this woman out and assaulted her for hours. They had a gun, kidnapped them from the beach at gunpoint, and this shocked the entire area, because crime like this was nearly unheard of. If my aunt and uncle would have stayed at that beach, there's no telling what would have happened to them. In fact, as terrible as this might sound, I have a feeling in me that both my family members would have been shot that day. My uncle would have fought his hardest to give my aunt a chance to get away, and if they had a gun, chances are they were ready to use it. The law had been looking for these 4 guys all day because they had gotten into some other mischief the day before, so the police had a description of them and their vehicle. When they finally did catch up with those men, they found the man of that couple beaten and battered in the trunk, and that poor woman in terrible shape herself. I give my uncle's gut feeling all the credit in the world for keeping the both of them safe that day 50 years ago. I'm grateful that he listened to his feeling when he did, and I'm so sorry that that other couple didn't have that same premonition. I was watching the Jeffrey Epstein doc on Netflix last night, and I'm spooked. I literally had a mini panic attack with all these memories flooding in. As I'm laying in bed watching, a girl's face flashes across the screen, and I recognized one of his victims as one of my really good childhood friends. I don't know if this belongs here, but here's my story. I lived in South Florida all my life with my crazy controlling parents that wouldn't let me do anything as a kid. No phone calls to friends, no extracurricular activities unless it was academic. Couldn't have friends over, and you can forget about me going over to anyone else's house. Plus, my dad worked at my school during my elementary school years, so I had to be on my best behavior always. When I went to middle school, I was so pumped. Finally, some type of freedom. My personality started to shine, and making friends came easy to me. Fast forward to a year in, and I'd become really good friends with these two girls. We can call them Heather and Sharon. They were both pretty, popular, friendly, but what fascinated me most was that Heather was the only girl in middle school that I knew that was able to sleep over at a boy's house. It was something so foreign to me, since my parents told me I couldn't even go on a date with a boy until after I graduated high school. So I automatically thought she was the coolest chick I had ever met. Throughout our friendship, we were known as the tripod. We had all the same classes and lunch periods, so we all got pretty close. Over time, Heather would always ask me to hang out with her and Sharon, either after school or on the weekends, but with my parents, there was no way in hell. I did attempt multiple times to ask for permission with no success each time, not even a maybe. I was so bummed because I always felt left out having Heather and Sharon hang out without me, something I would eventually become grateful for. One day, while sitting out in the courtyard for lunch, Heather pulled me aside and asked what I thought about skipping school for a day. I instantly freaked and thought about that automated phone call that the school makes to your house to let your parents know that you weren't at school. If my parents ever got that, my ass would be toast. So I shut that idea down right away. Kind of laughed it off because there would be no way to pull it off. But she literally would not stop asking. So eventually, she convinced me and we were ready to start the planning. It took us about a week, every day during lunch, trying to figure out how to pull this off. The thrill of it had me so excited, as I'd never done anything like this before. The plan was to have my mom drop me off at school as usual and have the girls there waiting for me, and we would simply just walk off to the gas station that's near the school and have one of Heather's friends pick us up. Not sure how I planned on dodging the school call, but whatever. Oh, and I forgot to add, Heather made it a point several times to remind me that I need to wear something that would give me an innocent look. I blew this off because I was only 13 years old. I looked innocent enough. The plan goes smoothly, and we're walking to the gas station. But as we're walking, Heather's cell phone is blowing up. Like constant phone calls and texts coming through. Each one she answers, just meet us at the gas station like we usually do. At this point, I'm confused because I thought it was supposed to be the tripod hanging out for the day. As we get closer to the gas station, I see a group of like 7 other girls standing there, and they're around my same age. Some girls I've even seen around school. Others I don't recognize, but they all perk up when they see Heather walk up. All of a sudden, Heather yells, "Who's ready to make some money?" And almost all the girls raise their hands and start cheering. I grab Sharon and ask her what she's talking about. The look that Sharon gave me is one I'll never forget. It was like she was saying, "Get out now while you still can." It just made me very uncomfortable, and she never ended up saying anything. It was just weird. A big group of young girls who should be in school just hanging at a gas station. As we're standing there, 2 black Lincoln Town cars pull up and make a sudden stop right in front of us. Heather starts numbering the girls and tells the first group to get in the first car. And as they do, that car speeds away. The other one slowly rolls down the window, and I see this older man with sunglasses on, just sitting there smiling. He asks if we're ready to go to the mansion, which excites the 2 other girls standing behind me. He opens the door, and they both jump right in, followed by Sharon. Heather is standing next to me, and she nudges me to go on, but as she does, I start going off on her, asking her what the hell is going on, where are we going, who is this man, and why she didn't mention any of this in her plans. She's looking almost annoyed at me and says, "Out of all the girls I bring, you're the only one that's giving me a problem. I thought you would want to get out and finally have some fun. And with your body, you could make a killing." At the time, I was so naive, I didn't know exactly what she meant, but by the tone of her voice and how pressured she was making me feel, I ended up backing out and ran all the way back to school. As embarrassed as I felt for bailing on my friends, I feared my mom and her belt a lot more. Plus, going off in a car with someone I'd never met screamed stranger danger right to my face. I'm so grateful that my parents put that fear in me, or else I don't know if I would have made the smart decision. After that, I barely hung out with Heather ever again. She tried a few more times, but I just got terrible vibes from her and cut her off. But I always saw her randomly walk out of school towards that gas station, and always with another group of girls. Sharon, on the other hand, she started to spiral into depression slowly. She would only hang out with Heather and would cling to her like a lost puppy. I noticed she would miss school more frequently, until one day, she just stopped coming altogether. Years later, I found out that she had committed suicide. And recently, after watching the doc, I'm convinced she was one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, and Heather was one of his recruiters. As all these memories have come back, it really served to confirm that I made the right decision all those years back. I'll take strict parents and a lack of personal life any day over what I imagine all those girls were exposed to. I'm not sure where you are now, Heather, but I hope that the weight of your actions have settled in on you, and that's something that you have to live with every day. This post may contain triggers for survivors of abuse. Please listen with caution or opt not to listen at all. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you all. I dated Todd, name changed to protect personal information, for 3 years during high school. He was a football player, and I was captain of the cheerleading team. So on the surface, we were an absolutely perfect couple. However, he was exceptionally emotionally manipulative, and by the time I was 17, that manipulation turned into emotional, physical, and even sexual abuse. When I finally shared what was going on with one of my close friends, I was able to figure out how to begin the separation from him and extricate myself from the relationship a week after we graduated high school in 2001. Todd was mortified. He told me that because we had been intimate, that he owned me. He told me no man would ever love me because I would be considered a whore. He told me that he would kill himself if I left him. I pressed on with the breakup and refused to look back. He stalked me for months afterwards. He would leave notes on my car, ranging from love professions all the way to threats. He would leave bouquets with my name on them around places I frequented. He found out what college I was attending in the fall semester and then applied. And he himself was admitted for the spring semester. I found this out and immediately transferred to a state university. It was a terrifying experience, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I finally told my mom what had been happening, and she was devastated. My dad was a cop his entire professional life, and many times had witnessed what happens when obsession and stalking goes much too far. My mom told my father some of the details. She knew my father would probably beat Todd within an inch of his life if he had learned the full story. That said, Mom didn't even know the whole story at that point herself. Dad had a talk with Todd. I don't know the details, but I no longer heard from him, and the fear and the pain of the experience faded as I moved on with my own life. Fast forward to 2014. At the time, I'd been married for 3 years and had an 18-month-old daughter. We were renting a home that was built at the turn of the 19th century in a quaint downtown area in a small town, far from where I went to high school, but still in the same state. At the time, my husband did not know about the abuse I suffered in high school because it felt like it was a lifetime ago. One night, I got a call from a phone number that I didn't recognize, so I let it go to voicemail. I should point out that I have had the same cell phone number since I got my first mobile back in 1997. I listened to the voicemail the next day, and it went something like this. Hi Rachel, it's Todd. I'm at the Burger King in the town that you currently live in, and I'm stranded. I was hoping you could give me a ride to the gas station so I can fuel my truck and we can have a chance to catch up. I thought to myself, that's weird. Who do I know named Todd? I work with many people and have many friends and acquaintances, and the only Todd I could think of was a friend of a friend that I know in town. I've only met him a handful of times, so I thought it was super weird that he would ask me for a ride. Ultimately, I forgot about it. A few days later, though, I get a call from another unknown number, and this time I answered it on accident. I meant to decline and instead accepted, so I was thinking, well, whatever. The conversation then went like this. Me. Hello?
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Who is this?
It's Todd.
Todd who? Todd says his last name and follows it with,
The love of your life from high school.
That's not funny. Who is this?
It's me. I'm here to see you.
If this is Todd, tell me something that only he would know. He proceeds to prove that it's him. Todd says, I need to see you. I miss you. I need you to pick me up. I'm borrowing someone's phone because I don't have one right now. I'm at the Burger King and I'm out of gas. I need you to come get me. I say, absolutely not. Call a cab. Todd says that he doesn't have any money and finishes it by saying,
I need your help.
I can't help you. And I quickly hang up. I called my husband into the kitchen after I hung up the phone and told him everything. I was shaken up. He closed and locked all of the windows in the house and double-checked all the locks on the doors. He held me close all night, and our daughter slept in our room as well. Obviously, I didn't sleep a wink that night. I'm a university professor, and so my personal details are not hard to find. I teach hospitality. The next day, I was teaching off campus. Apparently, Todd had showed up to my office with an armful of dirty blankets to, quote, donate to Rachel for use in hospitality for the beds. He was disheveled and shaking and talking super fast. My secretary sent him away and called me immediately. I, in turn, called the campus police. A few hours later, I got a call that they found him sleeping in the hallway on the 4th floor of our library. When the female officer found him and asked what he was doing on campus, he said he was going through a divorce and was here to propose to Professor Rachel, my last name. With his right hand, he pulled out a diamond ring and then showed her his left hand. It was taped with medical tape into a contorted, extremely painful-looking position. She asked about his hand, and he replied, I want to prove to Rachel that I suffer for her. The officer told him that I was indeed married, and he explained that no marriage would ever count because in the eyes of God, I belonged to him. They didn't arrest him, but detained him for further questioning. The female officer told me everything, and I was sufficiently horrified. They told Todd that he was to leave campus and to not return. They gave him a $50 gas card and escorted him to his truck and off the property. I am friends with the officers, so they told me where he was parked, and so my husband and I left work to incognito watch him leave. My husband gasped when he saw the truck, because he said it had been parked on the street in front of our house for a week. I went to the county courthouse and filed a restraining order, and it was approved by the judge the next day. However, because he was apparently homeless, they couldn't find an address to serve him with the papers. I still have no idea if he was actually served. We have since moved and had another child, but I work in the same office. Sometimes, I have nightmares that he shows up when me and my babies are playing in the yard. I truly hope I never hear from Todd again, and that he, his rundown truck, and his medically contorted hand stay far, far away from me and my family. About 4 years ago, I went to work at a warehouse in the small town that I'm from. I decided to leave after my health began to deteriorate, and I was diagnosed with panic disorder and severe anxiety after the situation that I'm about to tell you. This also changed the way that I developed friendships after that job. That's for certain. So I started this job on April Fool's Day of 2018, and I had no kind of high expectation for the job. All I wanted to do was my work, get paid, and go home, as I had 2 children at home and many things that I could work on there. The job wasn't difficult, and it made pretty good money for all the duties considered, so I really couldn't complain. I worked second shift for about 5 months, and then I went to day shift. While working on the second shift, I kept to myself mostly, until one day I met someone from one of the lines after we struck up a conversation about gaming. For the sake of anonymity, we'll name him JF. Well, JF was a pretty good guy, and we had a lot of things in common. I went home that night, and he popped up as a suggested friend on Facebook. Kind of odd looking back, but I decided to add him. When I did, we started talking more at work until he suggested that we should hang out. So we did, pretty frequently actually. We were friends for a month at this point, and one day, he decided that he was going to introduce me to his girlfriend. She seemed decent at first, super nice, didn't seem to be a judgmental type, so I was cool with her. From then on, I would hang out with him when my kids were spending time with their grandmother. One time, we were talking at a restaurant, and he started to vent to me. Dude, she's such a bitch sometimes. The other day, I forgot to take the trash out, and she threatened to stab me if I didn't. I've never been in a relationship where someone's threatened me, but she's not so bad, man. She's got good intentions. When he said that to me, I was concerned, but of course we had only been friends for a month, so I thought maybe he was just morbidly joking, so I chuckled at him. But that's when he gave me a pretty serious look and said, "I'm not joking, man. She really did that." That conversation right there concerned me. Fast forward about 8 months. They're still together, and we all hang out pretty regularly, forgetting the things that he had told me back then. One day, we were all talking, and he seemed just a little off that day. So I asked him what was wrong, in front of her. He flashed a smirk and said, "Nothing, dude. I'm just a little tired." He didn't have his eyes on me, though. He had them on her when I asked that. When we went to work the next day, I asked him the same question again. That's when he asked me, "Do you promise to keep this between us?" "Of course," I said. He said that he was breaking up with her, and she went a little crazy. He said that she grabbed her gun and pointed it directly at him and said, "If I can't have you, then no one will." He said that he diffused the situation and is trying to look for a way out. Not really knowing what to say here, I just said, "You'll figure it out, man. If you need somewhere to go, then you can come stay with me until you get her out of the house." Fast forward another year. He finally decided to leave her. When he did, she flipped out again. This time, he told her via text. She said that she was going to find him and kill him, and he was actually out of work that day with a vacation day. That's when he sent me a text that said, "Hey, let me know if she comes to work looking for me." That there struck me as odd because I had no idea of the situation that was currently unfolding. She actually did come to our job, and she asked me where he was, to which I replied, "I have no idea. I thought he was with you, and you guys went out of town or something." All she did at that point was roll up her window and drive off. I called him straight away and told him that she came by, and he called the police about it. They found her up the road with a loaded gun in the car with her. 2 months later, he decided to talk to her again, and when he did, he had something to tell me. When he called me, he asked if I had seen her around, and I hadn't. He said, "Dude, I would take some vacation days if I were you." Absolutely dumbfounded, I asked him why. He said, "Because she's out of jail, and she and her cousins are in town, and they're trying to find people that she has personal vendettas with. You're one of them." At that point, I was terrified. I grabbed my kids and we quickly left town. Took 2 weeks off of work. Come to find out, that next day, her and her cousins went to the next town over and shot 3 people in an apartment building and killed them all. I got the news about it the day after it happened. The reason why JF knew they were coming after me is because they made a Facebook Messenger group that he was included on, and they sent a list of names. I guess everyone thought it was spam and decided to disregard the messages, but he knew exactly what it was. 3 of the names on that list were the people that they sought out and that they shot. The 4th name on that list was mine. After the news story came out, JF decided to go public about the group and the screenshots that he had. And all those involved were charged with first-degree murder. From then on, I was very careful about who I would stick my neck out for, because even though JF knew the context of that list and her intentions, he decided to not inform anyone else on it. Needless to say, we aren't friends anymore, and I dodged a bullet, very much in the literal sense of things. Had I not learned what was coming my way, I undoubtedly would have shown up at work or come home one day and walked into the waiting arms of a very cold reception. That part, I have very little doubt about. This story goes back a few years now. I'm walking downtown in the middle of the afternoon when I become aware of a presence walking behind me. It's a busy city and a crowded street, so I don't think much of it. But this man stays right behind me for a few blocks. I can hear his breathing behind me, becoming ragged and coarse. It's getting heavier and heavier as he follows me. I don't want to turn around or make eye contact, but I can sense him following me. Then I hear him say it. "Honey, if you don't slow down, I'll never catch up to you." I get terrified. I feel my blood run cold, and I whip around to confront him. He's big, at least a foot taller than me, and I can see on his chest one of those little sticky paper ID tags. It's from a mental hospital. A mental patient has been following me for blocks and is now trying to get me to slow down. I turn away and immediately cross the street, not looking back, but he appeared to stop following me at that point. I'm still just as terrified by the incident, which is how I'm sure this post would have been written if I were the woman. But I'm not. I'm the guy. And this is the story about how I accidentally became someone else's let's not meet. I've been out of the office for over a week due to a nasty bout of bronchitis that utterly wiped me out. And my girlfriend, my poor loving partner who nursed me back to health, had now herself become stuck at home. And it was my first day back at work. I was just feeling bad for her, so I decided to try to do something nice for her. She's an avid player of Elder Scrolls Online, you see, which at the time of this story just released a new expansion. And that expansion allowed for a new class, and she had put off getting the expansion in order to focus on picking up some of the slack from my illness. So I decide I'm going to go get it for her. I decide on my lunch break to hit the nearby GameStop and get her the digital code. So on my lunch, I head out. Now, here's the thing. The local GameStop and my office are on the opposite sides of a very large hill. Remember also, I've been sick all week with bronchitis. Now, I get to the GameStop okay, buy the digital code, and text her a picture of it along with a message very jokingly telling her she needs to wait till I get home to play, because I'll never catch up otherwise. Then I begin to head back towards the office. I start walking back up the hill, and this is where the heat and the humidity and the fact that I'm walking uphill after, once again, having bronchitis starts to take its toll. And I begin, I'm quite sure very audibly, breathing heavily. I also just happen to be walking the exact path of a woman who has ended up directly in front of me. And now I've been walking behind her for a couple of blocks. Now, two important things about me. First off, I'm a tech nerd, so I have the smartwatch, the Bluetooth earbud, whole 9 yards. Second, I'm a big dude, in the 6'2", 240-pound range, former college athlete who still works out a lot. I'm a scary looking guy, but I'm a goddamn teddy bear who posts pictures of his cat on Reddit and wouldn't hurt a soul. But I am fully aware that in the wrong context, say if you're a 5-foot woman and you think I'm following you, I'm fucking terrifying. So what's the tech nerd relevance here? Smartwatch, Bluetooth. Girlfriend calls me, and I tap my watch to pick up the call without taking the phone out of my pocket, which syncs to my Bluetooth earbud. My girlfriend hears the audible chime on her end, and knowing I've picked up, launches into how she couldn't wait and is already playing without me. And that's when I, quite jokingly, as I'm glad she's feeling up to it, tell her, "Honey, if you don't slow down, I'll never catch up." And the woman ahead of me freaks out. She whips around, and I immediately realize, holy shit, she thinks I'm talking to her because I'm not holding a phone, and I've been following her the last 2 blocks, audibly wheezing. Then I realized something else. Remember how I said it was my first day back to work? I still wasn't 100%, and I left my work ID at home. I work in a very secure government building, the kind of building that doesn't just let you in. Even if all the security guards know your face because you've been there 10 years now. No ID, you still gotta go get a near cavity search level screen and wait for HR to verify that yes, you still work there and no, you're not a disgruntled ex-employee looking to steal confidential files or something like that. But once you've had your morning colonoscopy, they do give you one of those little visitor badges so you can come and go in the building throughout the day without having to have your pride and personal boundaries violated every time you walk through the door. And this little sticky badge that I still had stuck to my chest bears the name of the government agency for which I work. What agency is that? The Department of Mental Health. Because I, despite looking like someone who may have at one point in his life had a nickname like Moose, which has on occasion I think led to some initially getting the impression I might be a tad slow on the uptake, am actually the Regional Legal Director and Deputy Chief Counsel for the State Office of Health and Human Services. Her eyes move to the badge. She stays motionless for just a moment, then turns and quickly hustles down a side street. It was at that moment I say to my girlfriend, I think some lady just thought I was trying to kidnap her. So here's to you, downtown lady, who I'm pretty sure thought I was some heavy-breathing pervert mental patient instead of a government bureaucrat who was just trying to do something nice for his girlfriend on his lunch break while vastly overestimating his own physical well-being. Let's not meet again. I'm afraid that your heart just won't be able to take it. Also, I'm really sorry. This story takes place quite a while ago, but it's never very far from the front of my mind. Back in 2001, before cell phones were as prevalent as they are today, I was a mom in my early 30s who had just driven our kids to the pediatrician. The Macon, Georgia doctor's office was an hour away from our home, and I was just taking the 2 youngest of my 3 children to our scheduled appointment. Because we lived so far away, the office always gave us the last 2 appointments of the day, and we were grateful for this. The doctor had just built a new building off a fresh spur of the highway, so the location was quite isolated in every direction, but a very nice facility compared to his old spot by the hospital there. His new building was also pretty far back on the new lot, and my car, a black Jeep Cherokee, was only one of 4, maybe 5 cars in the parking lot when we arrived. I parked near the front door, removed the kids from their car seats, and for the next hour or so, we waited, saw the doctor, paid, and finally exited back outside. At that point, mine was the only car left in the lot as I loaded the children in their car seats for our trip home. But as the receptionist locked the front glass doors, my car somehow wouldn't start when I turned the key. There was just this odd clicking noise. Gathering the children once again, I knocked on the door until someone allowed us back in and asked to borrow their phone to call a nearby garage for service. I found one in the phone book, and the man said that he would come, but that it might be a bid. So I told him my location, left to go back out to the car, rolled down all the windows, and loaded the kids back into their seats once more as we waited. Soon, we watched as all the lights were turned out in the building again, and everyone left, their cars departing one by one from behind the building somewhere, leaving us now completely alone in this parking lot. As it was still light out, I spent a lot of the time trying to tend to the children, digging through our car for snacks and a bottle, making sure that they weren't getting too hot. You know, all the motherly duties. Although the service station attendant said that it was probably going to be a while, I was pleasantly surprised when a truck pulled into the empty parking lot pretty soon, and a man got out of his pickup, smiled and nodded to me, and said that he was going to raise the hood. He was middle-aged and a bit scruffy, but quite frankly, many gas station attendants sometimes looked that way, especially near the end of their day, and I was grateful when he began doing something under the hood almost immediately. I sat down again in the driver's seat with the door open, waiting for him to tell me to try the engine. But he seemed to be taking a long time checking the connections, and I longed for him to just grab jumper cables, yet he never did. Without getting out of the car, I asked him what he thought was wrong, and he said, "Oh, it's just a loose wire, not the battery," and continued doing whatever he was doing. I couldn't see his face at all from where I was sitting, but his hands were slightly visible through that long horizontal slit between the windshield and the raised hood as we waited. More than once, he said that it was merely a loose wire, and if I would just come up here really quick, he would show me which one it was, so it would never happen again. I remember kind of smiling and shaking my head, saying that sadly there was no reason to show me anything, as I didn't know anything about cars. I just thanked him and continued to stay in the driver's seat, again simply waiting for the inevitable sign to try to start the ignition that was most surely coming at any moment. At one point, I remember thinking that he was definitely flirting as he spoke, but I was trying above all to be polite and kind, as he was indeed helping us. We were hot and tired and a fair dose of miserable as well, and truthfully, I was distracted with my kids. Oddly enough, he was starting to sound a little frustrated with me because I wouldn't come up and look at the engine. I remember thinking that I certainly didn't want to make him mad where he left us all alone there, now that the sun was sinking so quickly. And then, the strangest thing happened. Another truck suddenly pulled into that desolate parking lot, and as it did, this nice guy working underneath my hood suddenly slammed it shut, ran to his truck, started it, and drove off without hesitation, without even saying a single word of goodbye. I was confused and a little anxious when this happened because I didn't know now who was arriving. I even remember feeling a little frightened that he had suddenly left me there alone with two little ones, defenseless. Why wouldn't he at least stay and speak to whoever was parking next to me now? It certainly seemed the southerly gentleman thing to do. I looked around and was very aware once again that there were no visible cars on the road, no homes or businesses nearby, and the sun was continuing to fall behind the horizon. As this new, also unmarked, pickup pulled in next to me, I got out of the car once again, this time a bit more apprehensively. Upon exiting though, he immediately introduced himself, and his name and voice seemed to match who I had spoken to on the phone much earlier. He then actually called me by my name, apologized for being so late, and finally smiled and stared towards the road, pointing and asking who the man was that had just left so suddenly. Relieved and unfazed, I just smiled back in surprise and told him, "Well, I don't know. I thought all this time he was you." And we both laughed slightly as he then grabbed jumper cables, walked to the front of my car, raised the hood once more, and began to work. I immediately sat back in the driver's seat once more, suddenly grateful that, with luck, that the air conditioner would be blowing full blast shortly, and once again checking on my children. While listening for the familiar words of "try it," I had my back completely turned towards the children when he surprised me by suddenly coming up to the driver's side door. In the strangest voice, he said, "Ma'am, is this yours?" And when I looked into his hands, he was holding a long, thin, dagger-like looking device that was about 1.5 feet in length. It appeared to be very old and covered with reddish rust. Yet, on one end, it had tiny, circular, small finger holes, as if it was a mix of a long, thin sword and scissors. An odd combination, I know. I remember being amazed, but not frightened, and I asked where he had found them. "Under the hood," was his response. I said, just matter-of-factly, that I had never seen them before, but how weird was it that those things had somehow been stuck and undiscovered in my car for the entire length of time that we've had it, as I shook my head in surprise. He continued to stand there and just stare at them, unbelievingly, and he looked oddly pale as well, like he couldn't find the words to speak for just a bit, continuing to stare at the unusual object. Honestly, I didn't care one bit about it. All I could think of was getting the car going, letting me pay, and leaving. He didn't say anything else, just quickly set them on the curb, started his truck, and then signaled for me to start the Jeep. And when it immediately caught, my 3-year-old cheered. Grateful, I quickly turned on the air conditioner full blast, rolled up all the windows, aimed the air vents back towards the back seat, and reached for my purse to pay out. I stood up and took a few steps to meet him so I could hear the amount that I now owed. With both of our vehicles running, he came back around to my driver's side. But instead of handing me the bill, he walked right past me and picked up that weird object once more. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I want you to look at these one more time." And he held them out for closer inspection. This time, I moved a bit closer and actually really looked at them. In his hands, the item still appeared incredibly large, possessing an almost bayonet-looking quality, except for the strangely small 2 loops on one end. I had never seen anything like it, and told him so. As he held it, he spoke quietly and slowly to me, as if trying desperately to make me understand something that was somehow still going over my head. "These weren't hidden somewhere in the engine, ma'am. They hadn't been there very long at all, because they were sitting right on top. They must have just been put there." I shook my head no and half smiled as I said, "But they're obviously very old and rusty." To which he pointed more closely and replied, "Yeah, but see how sharp they are? These look like they've just been sharpened." And when I looked down, he was right. The long, skinny dagger-like shape was unusual, but by far the oddest quality was just how sharp it appeared to be. The edges at the tip where the rust had been removed were gleaming silver in the light. As I paid him, his final words to me were, "Ma'am, I don't know what was about to happen here, but I'm really glad that I pulled up when I did." He quietly thanked me when taking payment, told me that I probably needed to call the police when I got home, and then asked me where I wanted the item. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to take it at all, but I released the back window so we could place it inside. We both then left the lot together, him turning one way, me turning the other towards the small winding highway that would lead home, still an hour away. I did indeed contact the Macon police the moment that we arrived home, and I got the children inside safely. But although they listened politely, they declined when I offered to bring the scissor-like thing to them later. The officer I spoke to said that they sounded as if they were specialized surgical shears from my description and measurements over the phone, which I found quite disturbing, as you can imagine. I remember wondering, how would he even know that? Why would he say that? I had tried so carefully not to touch any of the surfaces, hoping that they might be able to lift prints or test it for blood if they wanted. But the story seemed to bore him a bit, and he didn't seem interested. His attitude insinuated that, as there was no longer an emergency, it was of no importance now. At the very end of the call, as if to wind things up, he did say that it sounded as if I was very lucky that evening, and that I might want to keep the shears for a few days, just in case someone from his office got back with me later. But that was all. I wrapped them carefully in newspaper and placed them in the brick storage unit behind our house. And there they remained for several more years, untouched, until we moved away and I finally, not wanting to bring them across several states, reluctantly threw them in the trash. Around that time though, if you look through old news reports, women were going missing all over Georgia. Some bodies were eventually found, but others remain missing to this very day. I have often wondered what would have happened if that service station attendant hadn't arrived when he did. If my children would still have a mother, if I would have still had my son and daughter, if I would have missed all these years with them. I guess I'll never know, but I learned something very important about myself that day. I had always felt that I was pretty aware of my surroundings, pretty good at reading people, and staying safe. But because I was exhausted and tired and hot and stranded in a different city, my common sense and intelligence simply left me for a bit. And many of my friends and family still think that our car trouble that day and my lack of awareness could easily have cost us our lives. This situation happened when I was 19. I'm gonna be honest and tell you that I'm not the best looking dude, so I've never had much luck with women, and I ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck there either, until like the 3rd month of using it, when a blonde woman named Katie messaged me. She was pretty enough that I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until 3 days later that she messaged me again, which was odd because bots almost never messaged more than once. I clicked on her chat and replied, then looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We had been talking for like a month when she proposed the idea that I come to see her. I was pretty reluctant as she lived nearly 8 hours from me by car, but I had to admit, I really did like her quite a bit, and I had been thinking about asking her if I could come see her for a while now. After a bit more badgering from her, I finally said that I would take the drive to go see her. At this point, I had no reason to doubt she was who she said she was. We had video chatted every other week and called most days. I just assumed that I got really lucky. Things did get a little weird on the way there though. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was, and making sure that I was still coming. At some points, when I took more than 30 minutes to respond, she'd send me a slew of annoyed texts. Admittedly, I had chalked this all up to her being nervous about me coming to see her in the first place. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't blame her. I had a hard time finding the house at first. The directions she gave me were pretty confusing, and it was back through a series of gravel and dirt roads and a large thicket of trees. It was still about midday when I came onto an old-looking house. A window on the 2nd floor was boarded up, but it didn't look abandoned by any means, just a little worse for the wear. Katie's red buggy that she liked to talk about was parked in front of the garage. I took out my phone and texted her that I was here. She only sent a smiley face in return. When I got out of my car to go knock on the door, I noticed someone was looking at me from one of the 2nd floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that he comes to stay with her every now and again, so I ignored it and knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and even gave me a kiss, which surprised me, and I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about our plans when I asked her about her dad. "You didn't tell me your dad was here," I said. "Was that going to be a surprise or—" Katie looked confused and told me that her dad wasn't here. I still thought she was keeping up the act, and I told her that she didn't have to keep pretending, and that I had seen him looking at me through the upstairs window. Katie went pale as a ghost and said that we had to get out of there, now. We both ran out to our cars, and when I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad wasn't there, and that she had been home alone until I had shown up. I called the police, and while I was on the phone giving the address, Katie gasped and pointed to the window where I had seen the guy last. He was looking at us from out the window once more. I got a better look at him this time. He seemed older and frail, almost like he hadn't eaten anything in a while. He left the window after he saw that we had seen him. The police took nearly half an hour to show up, and the whole time Katie was crying, mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping her doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions, and the other two searched the house. They came back out a little later and told me and Katie that while they didn't find anyone, they did find that the back door was hanging open. Whoever it was inside had run outside into the woods, but the cops were sure that the house was empty now. After the cops left, Katie asked me to stay the night because she was rightfully scared to be in her house alone right now. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bed was the room next to the one the man had been in. Katie had also brought out the shotgun that her father had given her, but she had never used. I told her that everything was going to be fine. The man's gone, but she insisted, saying she'd feel safer if we had it out. To this day, I'm glad that she had that thought. Later that night, I'm laying wide awake watching TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. From the kitchen, I had heard the sound of a doorknob being turned. At this point, I wasn't even scared. I was just pissed. I flipped on the light in the kitchen and pointed the gun right at the kitchen door. And there he was. The guy that had been in the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm glad we had locked that door. The man unfroze at my sight, and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and told her what happened, and she called the police once more. When they arrived, they did a sweep of the woods and found no one yet again. They told both Katie and myself that it'd probably be a good idea to stay somewhere else for the evening. Me and Katie said our goodbyes. She was going to stay at her friend's house, and I was headed home. I left a little after Katie did. I was on the phone with my brother, telling him about all that had happened. My headlights were on, and I was just sitting in the driver's seat. But as I was talking, something caught my eye. Out of my periphery, I see that same frail man leering at me while partially hiding behind a tree on the outskirts of the thicket. It looked as if he thought he was concealed, but the edge of the light beam cast by my headlights did just enough to illuminate him against the adjacent darkness. I gunned it out of there at that point, didn't even bother calling the police again. But I did text Katie, and she said she was going to call them back. While we ultimately did talk and text a while after that meeting, that night was both my first and last time ever hanging out with Katie. And funny enough, according to her, that night was the last one that Katie ever spent in that house alone. This takes place maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but I still think about it every now and then when I'm walking alone and there's no one else around. I was volunteering at a school in a rural area about 3 miles from my home. I didn't know how to drive, and I have an irrational fear of biking, but that's another story. So I didn't mind walking home every Wednesday. I was 19 at the time, but I just know that I looked at least 3 years younger. Short girl, round face, big eyes, no makeup. It was winter and it was cold, raining, and I had no umbrella. It's fine though. I liked the rain, and I was covered from head to toe, so I still enjoyed my peaceful walk with music blasting through my headphones. But as I was walking, I saw something in my peripheral vision that I was always scared to see in a situation like this. A car slowing down, seeming as if they're following me. I didn't know what to do. I tried not to assume the worst, and I turned to see whether that was the only car on the road or if there were potential witnesses in case something happened. Nope, just this one car following me. No one else around as far as my eyes could see. That's when the driver lowers his window and I get a look at his face. Old man, seems to take care of himself, meaning he doesn't look weak, and his eyes are fixed right on me. He says, "Where are you going? Would you like me to take you somewhere?" I take out one earphone and I say, "Huh?" I had heard him because at that point, I had already turned down the music to be more aware of my surroundings. Plus, despite not wanting to assume the worst, I still wanted to buy some time to think of an out. Where can I run? Can someone hear me if I scream? Can anyone else see us? Where can I get help? Well, there was no one and nowhere to run or really hide. I was walking in a very rural area on the side of this road that had a field on one side and woods on the other. There was just one abandoned house up ahead. So I tried to reason with myself. This man is probably just concerned that I am visibly walking a long distance, right? Me. "Oh, no thanks. I'm fine. I like walking." He says, "Oh no, I don't care about that. I just want you to get in the car." What? Maybe he's concerned because it's raining and I don't have an umbrella. Me trying to give him every benefit of the doubt. I say, "No thanks. I know it's raining, but I like the rain, so I'm okay." "No, I don't care. I just want you in the car. I'll drive you wherever you need to go." For fuck's sake, really? I'm giving this potential kidnapper 2 excuses and he doesn't take them. His intentions are becoming clearer and clearer by the moment. I can't ignore this anymore, and he never breaks eye contact. Like he's analyzing my every move, every thought, every reaction. I'm starting to notice that his smile is starting to become more sinister too. Is it just my fear tricking me? This whole time, I'm trying to look as friendly and as naive as possible because I don't want him to realize that he can't trick me into getting into his car, and his only choice would be to use force. It's important to remember that there's no one around to hear me if I scream. He says, "Listen, I just want to talk to you. Can I?" Well, okay. What is it? No. I mean, I want to talk to you properly. Get in the car. I just want to talk. That's the only moment when he breaks eye contact, and it's to slowly look at me from head to toe. That's when he says, "Well, you know what? How about I park a little bit further up and you can join me to have a chat?" Yeah, sure. I don't know if you'll find a place to park anywhere close, but go ahead if you want, sir. I'm only walking straight anyway. Perfect. I'll see you there. He smiles and drives away. I wait for his car to be far enough so he can't directly see me, and I immediately run towards that abandoned house to hide while I make a call to my mom for her to come and get me. The police wouldn't do anything since I'm not in immediate danger. We've tried to call them once after some serious threats from a stalker, and they just told us to only call them if the stalker was on our property. But that's also another story. I explain everything to my mom as quickly as I can, and she tells me to send her a screenshot of Google Maps with my exact location, just in case something happens, and to stay hidden while keeping an eye on the road to see if that man's car appears again. I'm about to end the call when I see his car drive by once more. And what do I see? He's looking dead at me, as if he already knew where I was hiding, and he's waving at me with a smile on his face, still with this trying very hard to seem friendly vibe. He knows I'm hiding and on a call with someone now. He knows I wasn't as naive as I pretended to be. Then he just drives off. My mom is still on the phone with me, so I tell her what just happened, and she tells me to stay calm and to wait for her. We end the call. I wait. He doesn't come back. My mom's car appears much faster than I anticipated. I get in and we head straight home. I still can't wrap my head around exactly what happened and what could have happened. But sir, whoever you are, no matter what your intentions were, let's not meet again. One night, I went to the bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I hadn't been to many bars up to that point. My friend was drinking on the way to the bar, so he was already pretty hammered when he landed. When I sat at the bar, a cute girl came up to me and talked to both me and my friend. She said her name was Candace, and I couldn't help but notice that she had really bright red hair. I assumed that she dyed it. It was pretty, albeit a bit unnatural. Anyway, this girl was flirting with me and my friend. She could tell my friend was already drunk. So, to be honest, I played along as if I was already drunk too, since it seemed to be working for my friend. I didn't know if she was trying to just get free drinks, so I told her that we didn't have much money. She offered to buy us drinks. She kept buying us drinks, and I started to get confused as to who she liked between both me and my friend. My friend got up to head to the bathroom, and before he came back, he was kicked out by the bouncers for obviously being too drunk. Candace and I went outside with him. She kept telling him that he should come home with her. He was so out of it though, he could barely answer. I told her that he was too drunk and that I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and zero idea what happened. Candace kept pushing though, saying that she would take care of him. But I told her no because I had to stay with him. I was more sober than he was, and I felt like he was my responsibility. I told her the only way he was going anywhere was if I tagged along as well. I assumed that she thought that I was jealous or cock-blocking my friend, but he could barely stand and had lost interest in Candace by this point. She immediately began flirting with me and even offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home. That way we could head to her place, alone. At this point, I had a few drinks in me, and I was pretty buzzed, so I agreed to that plan. We took my friend to the taxi, and then I walked her to her car. I slightly stumbled on the way. "Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said, smiling as she held onto my arm. I was able to stammer out the word, "yeah." I don't know why, but I just felt slightly shy and anxious around her. Everything was just happening too easily for me, and that's what led me to feeling unease with the situation. We hopped in the car and began driving down the street. The first thing that she says is, "Want to stop at the liquor store and get some more to drink? I'll buy, so you don't have to worry about paying." I didn't want to drink any more than I already did. I was already buzzed and wanted to be able to carry myself throughout the rest of the night. Sometimes I made myself look a bit stupid when I was drunk, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace. I told her I was already drunk enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I told her to get me a pint of liquor with some apple juice to chase it. I know, big guy, right? She went in the store and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed she wanted to drink more also, and that's why she got a fifth. On the ride to her place, we passed the bottle back and forth, but she took only tiny sips. I tried to take tiny sips as well, but she kept passing me the bottle and urging me to drink. I was somehow able to discreetly finish all of my apple juice before turning that bottle into a receptacle for me to slyly spit alcohol into. Once nearly full, I hucked that bottle right out the window while she wasn't looking. I didn't want her to know that I had dodged all those extra swigs, so by the time we got to the front of her house, I had turned the drunk acting up just a little bit. I didn't want her to know that I was only buzzed, and I really wanted to keep my wits about me this evening. You see, throughout the car ride, I called her the wrong name a couple of times, basically in an attempt to get a reaction out of her. But she didn't flinch. She just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. This weirdness had me feeling like she lied about giving me her real first name in the first place. When we got out of the car to walk up to her house, I pretended to trip and stumble into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked, and we walked right in. She closed the door behind us and then deadbolted it shut. I thought that was strange, but assumed she didn't want anyone walking in on us. I told her that I had to use the bathroom. So I walked into the restroom, locked the door, and looked myself in the mirror. I just felt strange, like something was off. I felt a touch wobbly, like I was more drunk than I remembered being just a few minutes earlier. I turned on the sink to make noise and made myself puke up the liquor that I just finished. I flushed and went to the sink, started drinking the tap water out of my hands, doing the best I could to sober up. I just didn't want to be drunk then, but I still wanted to hook up with Candace, so I was going to pretend to be drunk. I turned the sink off and I could hear her talking to someone. "He's drunk as hell. He can barely stand up. You do it." Who was she talking to? And do what? I walked out of the bathroom and headed for the TV room. But the moment that I stepped into it, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head, that strange, very bright red hair, right at the edge of what I can only guess was a bedroom. I couldn't see her face or anything at this point. I just saw her kind of walk fast into the room. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred out. She walked back into the dark living room and up to me, saying, "Let's go into my room." I looked at her bright red hair and then into her eyes. But they were different. Her face was different. It was another girl with that same hair. That's when I realized it was another girl with that same wig on. It had been a wig the whole time. My heart felt like it had stopped, but I tried to look like I had no idea that it was a different girl. I smiled at her and told her that I needed to use the bathroom one more time, and I apologized that I wasn't able to hold my bladder. She said something like, "It's fine, just hurry up and get in here." I went into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I heard her whisper something to someone once more, only this time, I think I heard a male's voice whisper back. I honestly didn't concentrate on listening to exactly what she said. Something sketchy was going on, and I knew that I had to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window that thankfully opened far enough for me to slide my body out of. Once my feet hit the ground, I ran faster than I ever had in my life in an attempt to put blocks, and miles if I could, between me and that house. I ran through the backyard first, hopped the fence, ran through someone else's backyard, finally hit a road, and oriented myself to run towards the main road. I kept running down the main road until I saw a 24-hour convenience store. I bolted through the parking lot, stood straight in front of the main doors, right in front of the security camera. That's where I called a taxi from, and eventually got myself home. For the rest of the night and into the next morning, I tried to figure out what had happened. What was she, or they, planning that night? Why did she tell me a fake name? What was with the fake hair? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought maybe a robbery, but she kept spending money on us, so that didn't really make sense. She kept buying us drinks and even paid for my friend's taxi home. Who was the other girl that she handed that wig off to? Who was she talking to? What did it all mean? And what was in that room that they tried to lure me into? The following day, I went back to that house with a couple of friends just to see what was going on. There was nobody there. No cars, no people, nothing. Just an empty house. I ended up finding out that the house was a summer rental, and whoever those people were, they broke into the house the night before and used it only for that night, never to come back. It might go without saying at this point, but Candace with the red wig and friends. I can only hope that we don't ever happen to meet again. This story takes place in 1999, when I was a stupid 18-year-old kid with nothing better to do than cruise around at night. At the time, I lived in a very small town in Southern California, and the only places open after dark were the pharmacy, some fast food restaurants, and a super gross bar. So, like all kids, I made my own entertainment. I spent a lot of time driving around with friends, listening to the radio, and just talking. It beat just sitting around our parents' houses, I guess. But after one particularly terrifying encounter that summer, I was just fine hanging out in our cozy, well-lit homes. One night, my friend Shauna and I decided to do our usual loop around the main part of town, out behind the high school and back to our houses via the freeway. We'd been driving for about an hour, and it was nearly 11 p.m. now, when we decided to do one last loop before calling it a night. Along the way, we noticed some guys in another car. I don't remember how many there were, but at least two, the driver and the passenger, but there may have been more. We first noticed them at a red light, stopped in the lane to our left. "Hey, the guy over there is checking you out," my friend said. I tried to play it cool and pretended like I was looking at the totally boring scenery. "Oh wow, an abandoned gas station. I just have to see this. Oops, caught your eye." Sure enough, the passenger of the car next to us was absolutely checking me out. I don't really remember what he looked like, but it was the 90s, and this was a real white trash town, so probably looked like Fred Durst. Anyway, I gave him a small smile, turned up our radio, and sped off the moment that the light changed. The car stayed a normal distance behind us, and my friend kept looking over her shoulder, telling me to slow down so we could see if they were cute. I wasn't creeped out or anything, I just wasn't interested in playing flirt tag with some dudes, so I maintained my pace. By the time we got to the next light, they'd gotten behind me and switched lanes so they were pulled up to the right of our car. My friend immediately glanced over. The driver gave her the "what's up" nod, and I could see their passenger leaning forward to try to get a look at us. Shauna gave them a little wave as the light changed, and we took off once more. A few blocks later, I pulled up to a stop sign where you could either go straight or turn right. The other car, who had been a couple car lengths behind us and to our left, sped up to catch us at the stop sign and jerked into the right-hand turn lane. They were slightly behind our car, but we could hear them shouting, "Hello." My friend turned to look at the driver and saw him leaning out of his window, motioning for us to follow them, rather loudly. Nope, wasn't gonna happen. Red light flirting was one thing, but neither of us were so desperate to meet boys that we'd follow them in a car late at night, especially when there was nowhere to even go. She waved goodbye and we drove off, heading to the freeway entrance. In my rearview mirror, I saw their car flip around from wherever they'd been heading and start to try to catch up with us. I got onto the freeway, hoping they wouldn't follow, but wouldn't you know they did. They stayed a few car lengths behind us, but kept switching lanes. Now, if this happened today, I'd call highway patrol on my cell, but back then, neither of us had one. And at this point, I wasn't certain we were in danger, but I knew that something felt off. Their car continued to switch lanes behind us for a couple of miles, but they never really did try to catch up with us. Eventually, I hit a part of the freeway that was a bit more populated, and I began to calm down. They're probably just heading downtown, we said, or maybe to the beach. I bet they just wanted to try to talk to us. We cranked up the radio, decided to drive a little further out, and thought we'd lost the car. But we were wrong. About 15 minutes later, we'd exited the freeway and turned around to head home. I'd been driving for a couple of minutes when I see a car pull off the shoulder of the road and begin to follow us. At first, I thought it was a speed trap, but almost instantly, I saw that it was the same car from earlier. They'd been waiting for us on the side of the road. They pulled up alongside my car on the passenger side, and in my peripheral vision, I could see the driver gesturing angrily to us. Neither of us could tell what he was saying, but Shauna started shouting, "I don't know, I don't know," in response and doing an "I'm sorry" gesture with her hands. I tried to keep my eyes on the road, but I was also like, holy fuck, what's going on? So I kept glancing over. And that's when it happened. The driver elevated a gun from his lap and tapped it on the inside of his car window, pointed at us. Shauna immediately threw her seat back, which, yeah girl, save yourself, but thanks for giving them a clear shot at me. I looked over and saw the driver's face, which was absolutely furiously contorted with rage. He was shouting so hard that I remember seeing spit all over their window, which he was still tapping that gun against. I don't know what kind of gun it was. Black? Dangerous looking? I began reviewing a mental map of the area, trying to figure out the easiest way to get to a police station. We were about 6 exits from where we started, and I knew there was a fire station pretty close to there, so I decided to floor it and try to outrun them. I quickly gained distance and pulled into their lane, which was the fast lane and closest to the exits. They were driving some kind of Toyota sedan, and I was in a Honda with a lot of pickup, so I managed to clear out pretty fast. But they caught up. They pulled into the lane to my right, and I could see the driver waving his arm outside the window. The passenger was flipping us off out of his window, and then pulled out what looked like a crowbar, waving it from his side of the car like a fucking war boy looking for victory on Fury Road. I'm getting off at the next exit, and I'm heading to the fire station, I told Shauna. They're basically cops, right? Or they can call the cops, and we're gonna be fine. I said this as I was reaching over to grab her hand. Bitch was still flat, but she was crying and shaking, so I'll cut her some slack. Today, 20 plus years later, I'm the mom of a toddler, and I've still never felt the intense pressure of responsibility more than I felt in that moment. I had to keep us calm and safe and get us far away from these guys. The next exit was approaching, and they hadn't quite caught up or moved back into our lane. I quickly exited the freeway, heard them pass, and immediately gunned it for the fire station, hoping all the firemen were having a midnight party with armed police present. I hadn't gone very far when I see the car tearing ass to catch back up with us. All I can think is that they flipped a U-turn on the freeway and drove the wrong way to double back to the exit because nothing else really made sense. I ran a red light, hoping to God a hidden cop would pull me over, but no such luck. They were about a block or so behind us. With one eye in my rear view, I drove as quickly as I could, hoping they were done trying to scare us and they'd fall back. But instead, by by the grace of God or karma or whatever you believe in, their car either hit some kind of debris in the road or they simply lost control because they crashed into a mailbox on the sidewalk and slammed to a stop. I saw the driver get out as I was peeling away, and I swear to God I almost peed my pants with relief and gratitude. Now, before you comment that the gun was probably fake, let me tell you the last part of this story. As we were driving off, we heard the sound of a gunshot come from behind us. I didn't look back, but Shauna sat up to look, and she said that she saw the driver standing in front of their car, aiming the gun in our direction. I quickly turned in the direction of the fire station, just as we heard another shot. I get to the station and, for the second time that night, felt like some divine presence was watching over us. There were 3 police cruisers outside with cops standing around talking, and told you it was a small town. I pulled over, told them the story, and embarrassingly, fear vomited halfway through. The cops were so nice and immediately went to look for the guys. One stayed behind to get our full statements and made sure that we were okay. I'll never ever forget what she said to me. "You must have done some fine outrunning tonight, and I'm glad you finished the race in one piece." Here's what I know. They didn't catch the guys that night, and if they ever did, I never heard about it. They were driving a stolen car with stolen plates. We gave our statements, and I kept my eye on the news for the next few months, but I never saw or heard anything about similar reports. Here and now, Shauna and I are still friends and often reminisce about that night. Neither of us has any theories about what their intent was, but I think that comes from just not wanting to say it out loud, because I certainly have a feeling. So, in honor of this fine subs tradition, late 90s, probably Fred Durst looking motherfucker, and your gun-toting buddy, let's not meet. I was recently reading a story that reminded me of an event from over 20 years ago. In the latter half of 1998, I had taken a job as a security guard at a plant that made locks. Being the new guy, I usually worked one of 3 shifts, 4 p.m. to midnight, 7:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., and 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. That 7:30 to 3:30 shift was for extra coverage, so there were always 2 of us there from 7:30 to midnight. It was a routine, boring job for the most part. We did our rounds, logged anything out of the ordinary, and watched a tiny monitor displaying the CCTV feed. Things went by in an almost painfully normal manner for 6 months. I worked, saved, bought a car, and planned to move. By late March of 1999, I served my notice and prepared to head cross-country. A new hire was brought in to fill my post, a soft-spoken guy named Calvin. As part of his training, Calvin spent time working at all hours. At night, he was a shadow, working with myself and the other night guard, getting a feel for the plant's nocturnal routines. Most nights, he worked with myself and Amira, a female guard who was around my age. I was 18 at the time. Calvin, who was about a decade older than us, was quiet and polite, though something seemed to be missing. There's a spark that genuinely nice people seem to have, and he did not possess it. Whenever he went on rounds with me, he'd ask questions about the job and make small talk. I noticed that he was a little odd, laughing at odd times and changing his tone mid-sentence. At the time, I chalked it up to him just being awkward. But that benign feeling didn't last. One night, near the end of his first week, he went on rounds with Amira. When they returned to the office, I knew something was wrong. Normally talkative, she would barely say a word. Not sure what had occurred, I waited until Calvin had gone to the restroom, and I asked. During their trip, everything had been normal until they reached the brass mill, a portion of the plant that shut down at 6 p.m. There were usually no employees there after that time, and no lights. They were making their way to a checkpoint on a landing atop a flight of stairs, when the mood suddenly shifted. She told me that she turned around only to find that he was right on top of her. Startled, she backed against the grating at the end of the landing and he leaned in towards her, his face nearly touching hers. He flirted in a low voice, and when she mentioned his wedding band, he said it would be over soon. From then on, I did the rounds, taking Calvin with me each time. The night ended without further incident, and I left a note for our supervisor detailing what had occurred. The next night came and went with no Calvin. I did the rounds while Amira stayed in the locked office. Same thing the night after. Then, on my second to last shift, I come in to find her freaking out. She found out why Calvin hadn't been at work. Apparently, he had been arrested for murdering his wife. She had been dismembered and burned, parts of her body placed in a pond less than a mile from where we worked. That night and the next, Amira called the jail just to make sure they were still holding him. Based on the time frame of it all, it seems that he had killed his wife months before starting the job. He had reported her missing 6 months before all this happened, and when authorities went to the mobile home that he and his wife shared, they uncovered a scene suggesting that someone had been murdered there. It simply took them until late March to gather enough evidence to charge Calvin. I followed the case even after I moved away, and I believe that Calvin got 20 years for his actions. That means that at this point, Calvin is out after doing his time. But if past behavior is any type of prediction of the future, I truly hope that Calvin never remarries.